session went on for 4.5 hours, and I felt like if everybody had a chance to eat something and answer some calls, everybody would be less cranky.
Just a little bit
So I
less.
made an executive decision.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We are not protected by BOLI laws, but I do appreciate the 30 minutes for lunch today.
Made a difference in my outlook.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've got all my
It would in mine
capitalized.
too.
All right, good afternoon,
I didn't
everyone.
take my
This
own
is
pen.
the Wednesday, November 13th, 2019 afternoon session of the City Council. Keelan, can you please call the roll? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Daly,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Fish, Hardesty,
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. And we'll briefly hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during city council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you're a lobbyist. If you're representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you're in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good, thank you. Keelan, could you read the first two items, items 10, 48, 49 together, please?
Update bicycle parking regulations and amend fee schedule for land use services. And establish standards for bicycle parking for certain city-funded affordable housing projects designed but not yet permitted.
Colleagues, we're here today to be briefed by staff to hear public testimony on the Bicycle Parking Code Update Project. The project amends Title 33. The City of Portland zoning code requires the inclusion of long and short-term bicycle parking in new development. This section has not had an overhaul in nearly 20 years. As such, Portland's bike parking requirements need to be updated to address the increased theft and security concerns and to both reflect the increase in biking that we've seen over the last 20 years, as well as support the growth that must happen in order to achieve our city's goals. I'll now turn it over to Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a project that's come out of collaboration between BPS and the Bureau of Transportation. As we all know, reducing transportation emissions is a key part of Portland's climate strategy, and shifting trips away from single occupancy vehicles is critical to achieving those reductions. Side note, I shared today on social media that I've moved within 2 miles of City Hall, left my car behind, and will be walking, biking, or busing to work. And no good deed goes unpunished. I'm taking quite a beating on social media for that right now, although I do acknowledge that's not an option for everyone and want to come up with solutions that are equitable and inclusive. But it's social media, so what do you expect? So, back on track. Bike trips are an important piece of this puzzle, but we can't expect people to replace car trips with bike trips if they don't have an accessible place to store their bikes securely. I'm glad that we're advancing a key climate strategy that will support bike ownership and make using a bike for commuting, recreation, and running errands more accessible and convenient for more Portlanders. This code update, the first in 20 years, will bring our bicycle parking requirements into the 21st century. The project will add more bicycle parking at all types of new development, including multi-unit apartments. We've worked hard to ensure that these new requirements don't impact affordable housing projects currently in the pipeline. So I'm introducing a companion ordinance that enables those projects to move forward with the expectations that their funding packages were based on. And to be clear, This is a narrow exemption for 18 projects that have already been funded and fully scoped, and having to go back and revise their plans would be incredibly costly and could undermine the whole project. Moving forward, this requirement will apply to affordable housing as well. Together, these ordinances will advance our affordable housing goals, even as we set new sustainable transportation system expectations for buildings that will be around for the next 80 to 100 years. Mayor, I think we're going to bring up PBOT and BPS
Yep,
staff
we'll bring up
next.
PBOT, BPS staff. We have Catherine Carlo, Liz Horman, Sarah Figliozzi from PBOT, and Eric Engstrom from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
Mayor, I have a housekeeping question.
Commissioner Fish.
So I won't be here for the full hour and a half. Is it the goal of the sponsors of this to put the amendments on the table today and then at our second reading to vote on the amendments, or will you be voting on amendments today?
What I would propose we do.
I won't be here for the voting of the amendments today.
Okay, then what I would propose we do, unless anybody has any objections, I would propose that we hear the staff presentation, we put amendments on the table, so we'll get them moved and seconded. We'll take our public testimony, and we won't actually cast the vote until next time.
Thank you. I think that covers Commissioner Hardesty and me.
Great, good, excellent. Good afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm Catherine Chiarlo, Active Transportation and Safety Division Manager at PBOT. We really appreciate you all, especially after 4 hours of a long meeting this morning.
4.5.
4.5.
But who's counting? Who's counting?
Really appreciate you having us here to talk about this. It may seem small, but bike parking is something that has a large impact on how people travel. In fact, parking in general, as we all know, has a big impact on people's choices. If there's cheap, convenient parking available, we're more likely to drive where we're going. If there isn't, we're less likely to take a car. The same principle applies for bikes. If there's not convenient, secure parking, we're less likely to use a bicycle to get somewhere. We've briefed a number of you, and one of the things we've talked about over the course of those briefings is the fact that over the next 5 years, PBOT will be building about 75 miles of bike facilities, many of which are part of safety projects in East Portland. So the code updates in front of you end up being a needed complement to those improvements. We can't really expect people to use the new infrastructure if they don't have a place to safely store their bikes, where they know they're protected from theft and from weather, and it's accessible and convenient. And we really are committed to that new infrastructure being accessible to everyone, including people who live in multi-unit housing and including people who live and work outside the central city. So you'll hear from staff the very carefully negotiated code changes that we have come up with to find that sweet spot. We have definitely heard from, and I'm sure you have too, people who say the changes don't go far enough, and we've heard from people who say they go too far. We, in coming up with this proposal, feel like we have found a good sweet spot, and we are excited to share the results with you. I'm going to turn it over to Eric Engstrom from BPS, who has been our partner on this work.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Engstrom. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I manage the comprehensive planning group there. This, as Catherine mentioned, is a long overdue update to the bicycle parking regulations in the zoning code that's in Chapter 266 primarily, which covers parking, loading, and transportation demand management. These are existing requirements which have not been updated in quite a while. The updates focus primarily on the amounts of bike parking as well as the design and location requirements, with an emphasis on improving security and accessibility in terms of where the bike parking is and how it's designed. A review and overhaul of these requirements was something that we had originally scoped as part of the larger code updates that were surrounding the comprehensive plan update a few years ago. And we had a lot of public input at that time, and the bureaus and project partners recognized the need for more discussion with the community about this particular project, and so we carved it off as a separate project to follow up later. And the reason I mention that is originally this was scoped along the same timeline as the project that rolled back the auto parking requirements quite a lot. And so in terms of how this affects the developability of parcels and the feasibility of housing and commercial development, it was really seen as part of the two sides of the same coin and the same calculus. So I wanted to make that note. Partner bureaus are with us today in the room, including Portland Housing Bureau, which has helped us quite a bit in terms of understanding the effect on affordability and housing production. BDS is also here. There's an element of the ordinance that has a small increase in land use services fees to account for the staff time necessary to implement this. They're in the room if there are any questions about that aspect of the ordinance. And with that, I will pass it on to project staff to give you more details about the proposal.
Great. Thank you. My name is Sarah Figliozzi with PBOT's Active Transportation. Here to talk about the bike parking code update project. A few housekeeping things. We do have the project record in the room. And commissioners, in front of you, you also have an amendment memo of the known amendments, and also a summary page in terms of those key proposals that are part of this package. And then for members of the public, members who are in the chamber, we have copies of these up front. And then for those who are watching from home, they are linked on the PBOT website. So this project is one of several initiatives that the city has to address climate change issues, as well as looking at how we can increase transportation options for Portlanders around the city. And these goals are significant because, as we know, Portland is growing, and we are planning for a 40% increase in the population for 2035, yet we are already seeing worsening congestion and transportation emission rates that are going in the wrong direction. But for this reason, PBOT is focused on how we can use our streets most efficiently, and really how we can swap out these short neighborhood trips for walking, biking, transit. And the good news is that we know that 45% of all trips in the region made by car are less than 3 miles. And research shows that these are the easiest trips to be able to switch to swap by biking. And it's these shifts that can really free up capacity on our roads for those longer trips and those car trips that, those trips that need to be made by car. And we also know that transportation costs are the second highest household cost. And we know that biking can make a huge cost saving if it can be made convenient. So for all of these reasons, PBOT is heavily investing in making our bicycle network extensive, safe, comfortable. But we also know that the safest and the most comfortable infrastructure isn't going to convince 25% of Portlanders to bike if they don't have a place to store their bike, either at home or where they're going. And so for those reasons, strong bicycle parking requirements for development really play a significant role in ensuring that Portlanders have that option to bike. And it's the design, the location, and accessibility of these requirements that all play a key role in whether someone has that option to own a bike and use it on a regular basis. We know that if you have to carry a bike up and down stairs, if there is minimal security, if your bike doesn't fit on the available rack, then you're less likely to bike. So this code project really aims at trying to address many of these challenges that we've heard from our users. There's been significant testimony in the past couple of days, too, speaking to these points, to help ensure that there's adequate and usable bike parking at home and work and where people are traveling. For these reasons, we also want to highlight the role that private development will play in supporting these climate policies and then encouraging alternatives to driving alone. We know that a huge percentage of Portland's anticipated population growth will be living in these new projects that are being built along our corridors and our centers. And this provides us major opportunities to really think about how we're impacting these new Portlanders, how to move around the city, not only today, but again, to Commissioner Udally's point, for the next 50 to 100 years, given the lifespan of these new buildings. So the scope. The scope of this project is to update the zoning code bike parking requirements As Eric has already mentioned, we're looking at location standards, minimum required amounts of bike parking, and rack design standards for both the short-term bike parking, which is really intended for visitors. It needs to be outside near those main entrances. And then for long-term parking, intended for residents, intended for employees, it's inside, it needs to be very secure, it needs to be covered. The requirements apply to new development, though only projects that have more than 4 units on site. In some cases, the requirements will apply to redevelopment projects. Bike parking applies across all land use zones, and the minimum required amounts vary depending on the land use category. So we began this work with a stakeholder advisory group back in 2016. They really worked to develop the code concepts. They met for about a year prior to the code writing. And then as a Title 33 code update, it went through the typical legislative process. It was adopted by the Planning and Sustainability Commission earlier in the year with a vote 8-1, and delivering thus the recommended draft that you guys are deliberating on. So Eric has already alluded to this, but the work has been identified in several city planning documents, particularly calling on us to ensure that we are planning for all different types of bikes, but also, and this was a big focus of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, ensuring that we are planning for the people who need to use those racks, and really recognizing that we have communities with a wide level of abilities. So 4 years in, this project certainly can't be accused of being a rush job. We, through each phase of the
Good
project,
spin. Yeah, good spin. I like it.
we have conducted considerable engagement with different stakeholder groups. And as such, the code package really is the result of input from all of those voices. It is absolutely, and Catherine alluded to this, it is, as a result, it also includes a number of compromises. And those were really developed to make sure that we were balancing those different voices. As you see in the summary sheet, we have over 20 key changes. We won't go into all of those out of respect of your time, particularly today. But we just really want to focus on the key changes and those that have garnered the most community discussion. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Liz.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. My name is Liz Horman, and I'm with the Portland Bureau of Transportation. So as Sarah said, I'm going to walk through some of what we heard during our engagement, and then some of those proposed changes that this code update is looking to make. But again, happy to answer any questions off of that list. That's
Yeah,
on my
very
list.
good. And just by way of housekeeping, we'll let you finish your presentation, then we'll get to the amendments.
There's a good stopping
Then after
place, yeah.
that, we have some invited testimony, and then we'll get to open testimony, just so people know what the run of the show is.
Great, thank you. So really, this first topic is around security. And this was one of the key issues that was raised from stakeholders. And they really asked throughout this project, how can code help make bikes safer and reduce the incidences of theft? We know that the consequences of theft are not just the loss of property, but in many cases means the loss of someone's mode of transportation and really discouraging them from biking in the future. So this project really removes some of the weaker standalone provisions in current code, like being within 100 feet of an attendant who's likely not there 24/7, or in outdoor racks that rely solely on a security camera that, again, may or may not be functioning over that lifetime of the building. And in its place, the proposal says that long-term bicycle parking should be in restricted access and lockable areas, rooms, or enclosures. Further, we included some proposals to ensure that 100% of the long-term bicycle parking is covered and weather protected, and that there's adequate lighting to provide and improve personal safety when accessing bicycle parking. Next, today's requirements don't meet current demand and don't really even come close to meeting future demand. In fact, for office buildings, the current code standards only require bicycle parking spaces for about 3.5% of employees, which is well below our goals and well below our current bike mode split. And we've heard repeatedly about the lack of bicycle parking at all types of development across the city. So as such, one of the biggest components of the project was to update the amounts of required long-term and short-term bicycle parking for all of the 30 different use categories in code. And in order to do this update, we know that bicycle ridership is different depending on geography. And looking to the future, while we anticipate an increase in people biking across the city, our own transportation system plan has used the 5 pattern areas from the comprehensive plan to set specific bike mode split goals, which taken together will help us meet our citywide goal of 25%. Therefore, staff use those 5 pattern areas, as well as the bicycle districts in our bicycle plan, to develop a tiered system for the amounts of required bicycle parking. This is not a new strategy. Current code actually has a tiered system for the multi-dwelling uses, with one requirement for the central city and a different requirement for the rest of the city. But this strategy lets us acknowledge the different ridership rates while still proposing an increase to the amounts across the city. So with that geographic tier system in mind, staff used a data-driven methodology, again, based on the city's mode split goals, to update all of the required bicycle parking across the use categories. As has been said multiple times today, given that the majority of the bike parking code has not been updated in 20 years, the proposals have resulted in some significant increases. But when we look at the bicycle parking requirements of our peer cities, most of which have significantly lower rates of biking than we do, this update really helps bring us and our rates in line with those peer cities and really kind of putting us in the middle in some cases. And further, those proposed rates are based on meeting our current demand and the future demand for these buildings, which again will be around for 50 plus years. So this next topic has really been the most controversial throughout the project. We have heard from all sides around the placement of required long-term bicycle parking in apartment units. From users and people that live in apartments, we hear about the poor placement of racks by developers and designers. Again, you can see in these pictures, racks that are placed in the bedroom next to the bed, in the living room, really on the only usable wall over the couches. This is a staged apartment, and this is how they've staged it with that rack that's completely inaccessible for someone to use. And again, they've told us about those challenges with carrying a wet, muddy bike through their apartments, losing security deposits due to those damage caused by having their bike in the unit. On the other hand, we have heard from developers and have talked to a number of affordable housing developers about the spatial demands on projects when those bike spaces are located outside of the unit, and particularly this is a concern on smaller site projects. So as such, the Planning and Sustainability Commission spent some considerable time deliberating on the impact of the proposed changes on development feasibility, and particularly ensuring that there were minimal impacts to housing units throughout the city. Staff did provide PSC with a spatial and economic analysis prepared by an outside consultant and in collaboration with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And some of those key takeaways were, again, potential impacts vary depending on the project. Little to no impact on development feasibility for projects that can shift auto parking to bike parking. And the most likely impact, potential impact, was on smaller sites with no car parking. And so the PSC took that.
Just for the record, that's
Yeah.
Planning and Sustainability Commission. Sorry, we
Yes,
have lots
oh,
of
sorry.
people who watch
I'm
this.
sorry.
No worries, no worries.
I will try to remember to say the full thing.
So that's
each
a
time.
group of citizens who are
Yes.
impaneled to look at this. Thank you.
Thank you. So therefore, the Planning and Sustainability Commission really looked to balance all of that input, and their recommended draft creates a number of compromises through the following proposals. First, again, no bike parking is required for sites with 4 units or less. Second, for any residential project, 50% of the bicycle parking can be placed within a unit. And then third, this is really to address those small sites with 12 units or less, 100% of that bicycle parking can be located within the dwelling units. And again, that was really to mitigate that potential impact we saw in our analysis on these smaller sites.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. After looking at those beautiful pictures of bikes over beds and stuff, will this proposal actually kind of mandate a more reasonable place for the bike rack?
Thank you for leading me right into this next slide. So in addition to those compromises, the Planning and Sustainability Commission also adopted in-unit design requirements to keep bikes close to the front door and in a designated design spot. These design standards really were, again, that balancing of feedback we heard from users and the challenges with in-unit bicycle parking, from the developer concerns about too much regulation and really wanting more bike parking to be put in the unit, and then also talking to our Bureau partners, our Bureau of Development Services that is tasked with implementing and enforcing the standards. So trying to come up with design standards that can address all of that. And the reason for the closet or alcove and not just sort of has to be within a distance of the front door, is really that, some of these apartments are small, and 15 feet from the front door really could mean that the bike rack is still placed in a bedroom, or it's still in an unusable spot within the living rooms. And so the PSC sort of put these design standards in as a compromise. Planning and Sustainability Commission put these design standards in place when they also agreed to increase the amount of in-unit bicycle parking. So got that controversial one out of the way. So the next one of the key goals of this project, again, was really to ensure that bicycle parking is usable for all people and people that have all types of bikes. Our current code really is fine for able-bodied Portlanders who ride a lightweight two-wheeled bicycle, but we've heard from many folks that vertical racks that require someone to lift the bike up onto the rack are difficult to use, that access routes to bike parking have included stairs and other things that they have to take their bikes over, and that there's no space for their cargo or family bike or for other types of bikes like tricycles or recumbent bikes. And all of that has led to discouraging them and excluding them from owning bikes or using bikes. So the project has several key proposals to address those usability challenges, requiring a minimum percentage of horizontal racks so people don't have to lift their bike onto a rack, requiring lift assist for double-decker racks, and then for certain projects requiring larger spaces and for outlets located near racks for e-bikes.
Could you tell us where some of those photos were taken, or those are local, I assume?
On this one, or the?
No, go to the next one. Where were those photos taken?
So the cargo one, it was a European city example.
These are stock photos from somewhere.
Yeah, it looks like a
Yeah,
London,
so we
it looks
don't-
like
we-
a London
Yeah.
train
Yeah.
station.
How can you tell? That's impressive.
Yeah. So
Charing Cross, I would guess.
So we have seen a few projects that have done sort of those spaces, kind of on their own, but there really aren't many around, especially for long term. So why we're using an example from outside the city.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So these last two components really address elements of flexibility. Throughout the project, we've been working with developers and architects to develop a suite of proposals to enhance flexibility, as much as code allows, really recognizing that, all projects are unique and code can sometimes be difficult across that. So first, while staff have observed that ground floor roll-up access bike rooms are the most used, again, we recognize that this does not work in all development contexts. So really allowing and including flexibility of where bicycle parking can be located throughout the building, on the site, and even maintaining a current a code line that it can be within 300 feet of the site. And then just second, there are a number of proposals that streamline the code and provide just additional flexibility. So proposals include exempting bike room space from FAR and increasing the options for space-saving racks for developers to use. So I just want to, again, end this part of the presentation. Eric mentioned it earlier, that as part of the ordinance, there is a proposed 5% fee increase, the land use services fees, to which cover the Bureau of Development Services staff time and review. And that equates to about roughly $50 per project. And staff are in the room to answer additional questions.
Very good. Any immediate questions, and then we'll move to amendments? Very good. Colleagues, for the sake of the hearing and the benefit of those who are going to be testifying later, can we move some of the known amendments? To be clear, these amendments are for the Title 33 code update. They are in the memo in front of you. Item 1048. Fellow commissioners, you have this list. For members in the public in the chambers today, there's copies of the amendments in the front of the chamber next to the council agenda, but I think, does everybody have one now?
I'm going to make sure I have that list.
And with that, Commissioner Udaley, if you'd like to make the motion.
I'd like to move an amendment to the Title 33 changes that accompanies the companion ordinance amendment to item 1048 that exempts these affordable housing pipeline projects from the new code sunsetting in June 2022. The amendment reads, insert a new clause at 33, how do you say that? Point?
That works.
33.266.2 200.b.2 on page 37 of the recommended draft to exempt approximately 25 affordable housing projects from revised code until June 30th, 2022. This is amendment number 1 listed in the amendment list in front of us and supports the second ordinance we are discussing today by allowing 18 specific affordable housing projects that are currently in the development pipeline to use the current code. This includes the 9 projects that were awarded Portland Housing Bond funding.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Udaly. We have a second from Commissioner Fritz. I'd also like to move the 4 additional amendments. Number 2, bicycle parking information and plans. I move to amend 33.266.210.c.5 on page 57.
Second.
Very good. Number 3, FAR exemption for bicycle room space. I move to amend 33.130.205.b on page 93 of the recommended draft.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Number 4, prohibition of cable components in rack design. I move 33.266.210.c.2 on page 47.
Second.
Number 5, increase non-conforming use threshold. I move to increase the threshold to trigger improvements to non-conforming development from the current level of $168,550 to $300,000. The value will continue to increase by the construction cost index each subsequent year. I have a second. And finally, I'd like to move to approve the staff technical amendments.
Second.
We have a second. Very good. So before we,
Is that the known universe of amendments?
that is the known universe of amendments that we have so far listed in the memo in front of us, and that is accessible to the public. Keelan, if people want the packet, can you?
So, Mayor-
Are they still outside or are they in here now?
They're right over here behind.
Okay, so if anybody would like a copy of the amendments, they're over here. It looks like on this little desk over here.
Mayor, just a
Commissioner
protocol
Fish.
question, because I have
Yes.
to leave. If someone testifying during the hearing offers an amendment, will it be your protocol to second it so that it's on the table for purposes of discussion?
If one of our commissioners do, absolutely, yes.
No, if we have testimony from people that have, like I know Amy's got an amendment, I believe, there might be others. I just want to make sure we capture whatever's,
Within reason, I'll agree to that. I always reserve the
no,
right
it has
not
to be
to.
screened
but-
to make sure it's
Yeah.
germane and in the ballpark. but-
Yeah. Serious amendments that people put forward, we will second for the purposes
Well,
of discussion.
somebody has to move it first.
Yeah, I'm.
It still
I'm
needs 2 people
confused.
on the dais.
It does, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Does that answer your
Helpful. Thank you.
question? Okay. Very good. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I have one question about the amendments that we've just moved, if I might,
Please.
since I'm leaving
Yes.
in just a couple of
Yeah.
moments. And it has to do with the affordable housing exemption. And based on what I'm reading, I understand that it's because these projects have already been approved and they're quote-unquote affordable housing. What is the percentage of median family income that these 9 properties will build housing for?
We may bring up our colleagues from the Housing Bureau.
Matt Traybold is here.
Well, for the ones that received housing bond funds, that would be 60% and below.
60% or below?
Yeah, good
Hey, Matt.
afternoon. Matt Schauble with the Portland Housing Bureau. So the 18 projects, there are, all of the units are at 60% AMI and below. There are 658 units at 30% AMI and below, 102 units at 50% AMI and below, and 885 units at 60% AMI and below.
So excellent. That does actually sound like housing people can afford to live in. But don't we want people who are living in affordable housing to also have the privilege of bike ownership?
We do, and that's something that was discussed at our Portland Housing Advisory Commission meetings. PBOT came and engaged with that body several times, and the challenge that they were wrestling with and that we wrestled with is that for the affordable housing projects that are have been committed, these 18 projects that have been committed, had funds committed, the timeline to secure funding and to develop is much longer than for private market developments. And so while we're supportive of the new bike parking standards, given where these projects are in the process, it would require a change to their project, either reducing units or reducing the size of units or increasing the cost and requiring more subsidy if they were to immediately implement the new requirements.
Last question. Can I expect that moving forward, that affordable housing will have the same requirements that housing that's not affordable will have?
Yes.
Market rate, sorry. It's affordable for somebody. I just don't know who.
Yes.
Right? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, you bet.
Mayor?
Commissioner Daley.
I'd just like to briefly comment on how this item might seem insignificant or nitpicky to some people, that we're requiring bike parking in multifamily developments. But I just visited 5 different sites. They all have bike parking. 3 of them indoors and secure, 1 of them outdoors and secure, and 1 of them just outdoors uncovered. They were full of bikes, and there's high demand for this, and living in a very small space, having a bike inside your apartment in the space that you're trying to move around and live in is awkward and undesirable. So I just wanted to put that out there as someone who's now experiencing apartment living for the first time. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. So before we begin public testimony, we're going to hear from a member of the Planning and Sustainability Commission. Commissioner Chris Smith has been waiting very patiently. We thank you, sir, for being here.
While he's coming up, Mayor, I'm excused for the rest of the afternoon. I just want to applaud the work that was done on this bike update. I had a lot that I learned about this process, and I am greatly appreciative that you took the time to do it in a way that actually brought most people on board. So thanks for the good work.
All right, and I know Chris is a true believer. I saw him in a bike share just yesterday. Greetings.
Good afternoon. Chris Smith, Vice Chair of the Planning and Sustainability Commission and representing the Commission's recommendation today. Mayor, you have no idea how patiently I've been waiting for this. I was a member of the Bicycle Plan for 2030 Steering Committee, which created the recommendation to do this project back in 2010. I have been the PSC's liaison to the Stakeholder Committee for this project and obviously helped shepherd it through the PSC. So I'm very happy to be here today for the final hurdle. I want to put this in context with something we just heard at the PSC yesterday, which is an update from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on our greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm very sad to report that after a long trend of decreasing transportation emissions, in the last 2 years, transportation emissions have begun to rise again in Portland. Achieving the 25% bicycle mode share is a critical element to counteracting that and continuing the positive inroads that we've made in that area. So to me, this is really a 3-pronged effort to help achieve that mode share, and it has benefits to the environment in terms of greenhouse gases, to our transportation system. Our transportation system, basically to accommodate the increases in population and jobs, requires a corresponding mode shift away from single occupancy vehicles. And when we fail to match those 2 curves, we get the congestion we see in our streets today. So it's critical to make our transportation system work. And finally, it's an affordability measure. Households that can make bicycle transportation part of their household routine save on transportation costs, and that's a vital outcome to achieve. So I'd like to spend most of my time focusing on the compromise that we made in the PSC around the in-unit parking, because as staff pointed out, that was critical. When this proposal came to us, we actually had different rates for in-unit parking, for affordable housing, for market rate development. The PSC, like Commissioner Hardesty, was adamant that we should not have different standards for different levels of affordability, and we looked for a way to make that work. And what we heard was from developers that with the increase in the amount and to some degree the floor space that bicycle parking will take up, there are a certain amount of spaces in any building that are not suitable for living units, and those are good candidates for bike rooms. But with the new goals, that wasn't enough, and we needed somewhere else to put that and preserve flexibility. The in-unit parking appeared to be a way to achieve that, but we were faced with the problem that traditionally, in-unit parking in Portland has meant basically no bike parking. That it was, you could hang a hook on a wall and really not be making an effort to achieve this. So we worked hard to, one, have the same standard for market rate and affordable housing, and two, to make sure that the in-unit parking was truly useful. And that's why we adopted the standards for 15 feet from the door, and particularly that it be in a designated storage area, not in a living area. And I think you're likely to hear a request for an amendment to take away that criteria that it be a storage area. The PSC was very adamant about that, and I want to underscore that. Also want to address one point I heard or read in testimony from the Housing Advisory Committee, which is they would like the flexibility to store other things, whether it's strollers or mobility devices, in the bicycle parking space. You know, I would point out that the in-unit storage allows that because we're essentially putting bicycle storage in private space in some cases, in common space in other cases. In the private space, you know, there's no regulation of how you use that. If you have a bicycle, you want to put it there, great. If you want to put a kayak there, if you want to put a stroller there, it's up to you. So the relatively high in-unit percentage provides some of that flexibility for how you use that storage space. I'll wrap up by saying that this is a necessary step, a vitally important step. It's not the only step. We have lots of older buildings in Portland that don't have anywhere near this amount of bike parking or no bike parking at all. One of the things we talked about in the PSC is it's incumbent on the city to have probably some kind of district parking solutions where you could have a bicycle garage to cover the need generated by other properties that, you know, were built without bicycle parking. It would be very difficult to retrofit. So this is not the end. And finally, I just want to thank staff in both BPS and PBOT who have worked so hard on this. I have been behind them yelling and pushing for the last 5 years, and I'm just delighted with all the work they've done, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate them.
Chris, I want to thank you for your leadership personally. You've done a great job, and you've been pushing this for a long time. And
Thank you.
I'm glad that this is coming to fruition.
Me too.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We're going to now hear from members of what's called the ABC, Andando and Bicicleta? Bicicleta? Is that close? See, excellent, good. Cully Group to come up and share their stories as part of the project's invited testimony. Come on up, please. And I believe we have 5 members, is that correct? Michelle, Yanni, Zomi, Isabel, and Vaya? Bella? Bella?
Belia.
Belia?
Yeah.
Oh, boy, I really butchered that. Sorry. Thank you, Belia. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. We appreciate it. And sir, will you be translating?
Interpreter, yes.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you. Would you like to start?
¿Quiere empezar usted?
Actually, yo no iba a empezar, luego vamos a ver las
I'll begin.
Okay, thank you. And the microphones slide around, so about this far is about right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. ¿Todos listos? Sí. Muy bien. Hello, my name is Miche. I'm honored to be here today as the program coordinator for ABC, short for Andando en Bicicletas y Caminando. Our mission is to unite the community with activities and events to spread awareness about the benefits of cycling. ABC also works to inform and support the community regarding pedestrian and cycling safety and infrastructure issues. So we are honored to be here today. ABC is a Latino-led organization that has been around for 10 years with origins in the Northeast Cully neighborhood. The Community Cycling Center, who I will refer to as CCC, partnered with ABC, and after 3 years of advocacy, we were able to obtain, for 10 members of our community, some rudimentary long-term bike storage units for a few of the residents living at Hacienda Community Development Center. This took 3 years to accomplish, and the units themselves, they're all right. They're not like the best. They kind of leak, and there's like moisture that builds up, and the bikes are slowly being rotted or what's the rusted away. Thank you. And you know, they were what we could get at the time. And still, with those units, there's not sufficient bike storage for all. Many members of our community are denied long-term bike storage solutions and have endured unnecessary suffering at the hands of landlords or apartment managers who target them for leaving their bikes on balconies or keeping their bikes inside their homes, which, might I remind everybody, are the only places they have to safely store them. In the CCC's report, Understanding Barriers to Cycling, we found that 60% of Latino families reported that they do not have access to safe, long-term bike storage solutions. Every single person here, our children, even myself, we've all been victims of bike theft. And I'm talking recently. Within the last couple of weeks, we've had people who've had their bikes stolen. This impacts our ability to transport ourselves to work, to the grocery store, to feed our families, our access to a healthy lifestyle, leisure, and it negatively impacts our overall health. Each of us has been the victim of faulty infrastructure that does not take into account the barriers that current housing creates when they do not provide a safe place for families to store their bicycles. Not having access to dignified, secure, and long-term bike storage close to home and work creates barriers that affect the most vulnerable people in our community. And with that being said, I will now have my ABC members present their testimonies.
Los miembros pueden presentar su testimonio.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Mi nombre es Johnny.
My name is Yoni.
Soy miembro de ABC
I'm a member of ABC.
y es un programa que significa andando bicicletas y caminando en Cooley.
Oh, okay. Dilo.
El programa ABC que significa andando en bicicletas y caminando en Cooley.
ABC means going by bicycle in Cully and walking in Cully.
Estoy aquí por una razón que nosotros tratamos de andar en bicicleta para nuestros hijos,
And we're here for the reason of using bicycles for our children.
para nuestra comunidad, pero,
In our community.
pero tenemos un problema
We have a problem
en nuestros apartamentos
in our apartments.
que no nos permiten tener bicicletas
They don't permit us to have bicycles
en nuestros balcones
on our balconies.
y no tenemos suficiente espacio para poner nuestras bicicletas dentro de la casa.
And we don't have sufficient space to keep it in the house.
Y de las otras cosas que han pasado,
The other things that have happened,
si lo dejamos afuera,
if we leave them outside,
nos lo roban.
they steal them.
Entonces estamos aquí para ver una solución,
We're here to seek out a solution,
poder tener nuestras bicicletas en nuestras manos
to have our bikes in our hands
y andar con nuestras familias,
and to get around with our families
cuidar nuestro medio ambiente
and to take care of our environment
y buscar una solución para tener un garage de bicicletas.
and we would like a solution to have a garage for bicycles.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Mi nombre es Suemi.
My name is Noemi.
Yo tengo 3 niños.
I have 3 children.
Soy parte del grupo de ABC
I'm part of the ABC group,
y yo también tengo problemas con las bicicletas.
and I also have problems with bicycles.
Como ahorita mencionó mi compañero, a mí también no me permiten también tener las bicicletas en mi apartamento.
As my friend has said, they won't let me have bicycles in my apartment.
Yo vivo en bajos recursos y está
I
chiquito
live
mi
with,
apartamento.
Lower,
Y me van a chequear mi apartamento constante cada
they check my
6
apartment
meses.
constantly for
Y
the
esta
past 6
semana me
months.
llegó una nota donde me dicen que no puede estar mis bicicletas ahí. Tengo 3 bicicletas.
And they give me a note that I can't have bicycles in the house, and I have 3 bikes in the house.
Y pues estoy preocupada porque pues mis niños pues eso usan todos los días.
I'm worried because my kids use them every day.
Y pues no sé qué hacer y hace un mes también me los robaron.
And I don't know what to do. This month as well, they stole some bikes.
Y yo también estoy pidiendo solución para eso.
I'm also seeking and requesting a solution for this problem.
Sí, porque pues mis niños, cuando esta vez que se los robaron, ellos estaban tristes.
When they robbed the children's bikes, they were sad.
Cuando ellos llegan de la escuela a las 3 de la tarde, ellos agarran su bicicleta
When they get home at 3 in
y
the
andan en
afternoon,
bicicleta
they
toda la
grab their
área donde
bikes
yo
and they
vivo.
go out and about.
Y pues yo estoy preocupada porque pues yo también es un problema.
I'm worried because this is a problem.
Y por favor, si quiero que haya una solución.
Please come up with some solution.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Belia Mendoza
My name is Bea
y
Mendoza.
soy miembro de ABC,
I'm a member of
andando,
ABC.
caminando y andando en bicicleta.
And I also
Mi
go around on a
experiencia, también
bicycle.
vivo en apartamentos de bajos ingresos y,
And
y tengo una
live
niña.
in
Tengo
low-income apartment.
tengo 5 niños, pero los demás ya están grandes. Tengo una niña de 11.
I
que es la
also
que
have
tiene su
5
bicicleta.
children, and I
Tengo
have
mi
an
bicicleta
11-year-old girl.
y mi esposo su bicicleta. Tenemos las 3 bicicletas en el cuarto de mi niña.
And my kids use bikes, and so does my husband. So we have 3 bikes in the house.
Y no me gusta tener 3 bicicletas en el cuarto de mi niña porque ella cuando anda ahí se me golpea. Yo cuando ando limpiándose me golpeo también.
I don't like to have all these bikes in the house because I keep running into them when I'm cleaning.
Ya saqué una vez hace tiempo la bicicleta de mi niña, se la robaron.
I took one bike out and they stole it.
A mi compañera ella vive en el piso de arriba, puso el carrito que se le pone a la bicicleta.
And I have a neighbor who lives above me, and they try to secure their bike.
No sé cómo bajaron ese carrito porque está grande el que se le pega a la bicicleta, se lo
It has a
robaron.
little trailer. I don't know how they get it down to the street level from there.
Y pido su ayuda, que nos apoyen para que pongan garage o un lugar para poner nuestras bicicletas.
I'm asking your help to put some sort of a facility, a garage, to keep our bikes in.
Y muchas gracias por
Thank you so
escucharnos.
much.
Y darle oportunidad al interpretador que tenga.
Mi nombre es Isabel.
My name is Isabel.
y Estoy aquí por la misma razón de que no tengo espacio donde tener mi bicicleta.
I'm here for the same reason that I have no space to keep bicycles.
Y quisiera tener un espacio seguro donde guardarlo para poder tenerlo porque pues es muy importante para mí y para la comunidad tener una bicicleta para que uno salga para traer al mandado o para hacer ejercicio. Es bueno para la salud.
And for me, it is
Y-
important to have a place to keep bicycles, to go to the store for exercise and that.
Deseo que si pudieran poner un espacio seguro para la bicicleta.
It would be my desire to have a secure place for bicycles.
Porque pues afuera uno no lo puede tener, se las roban,
Outside, you can't
O
have
se-
them. They'll steal them.
se oxidan y por eso es lo que yo quisiera.
That is
Gracias.
what I would desire.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
I think that concludes our testimonies.
Excelente testimonio. Está bien apreciado. Gracias a todos por venir. En un miércoles.
That you are here and thank you for interpreting. It makes it recognize that there's lots of us in this community that need these services. Thank you.
Hay mucha persona en la comunidad que necesita. It's very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla, how many people do we have signed up for public testimony?
We have 9.
I'm sorry?
9.
9. Okay, and if there are folks who have a disability or children and you need to go early, please let Carla know. Otherwise, we'll just read the names in the order that people signed up. When you come up, if you could be as specific as possible about what code provisions you're testifying on, that just simply helps us keep track of where we are. If you can do that, that would be appreciated. So with that, Carla, could you please call the first three individuals?
The first three, please come on up, are R.J. Shepard, Edward LeClaire, and Jonathan Ling.
Thank you. Come on up. Would you like to start for us, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So my name is Jonathan Ling. I am here representing the Community Cycling Center and also in support of ABC, Andando en Bicicletas y Caminando. So we're kind of feel like we're taking over here. And I'm here representing Community Cycling Center's charitable programs as well as our related businesses. I'd like to echo what you've heard from the members of Andando en Bicicletas y Caminando. In our conversations with partner communities, we've learned that space to store bicycles remains a major barrier to folks living in multifamily housing. According to our own Understanding Barriers to Bicycling report published in 2012, the only safety-related theme that all groups identified with having having enough space to store their bicycles securely. Many participants expressed concern about guarding bicycles from theft. They noted the lack of safe places to store bicycles, especially in residential complexes and at destination locations such as schools. A total of 35% of the low-income housing residents of color polled for the study reported that secure storage was a major barrier to using bicycles as part of how they get around Portland. We believe that making this a choice between affordability and transportation and affordable shelter is unfair and unnecessary for the communities we serve. They deserve to be safe, healthy, and connected just like everyone else. Bicycling is cheaper for most people and more viable for folks without a driver's license. According to Vancouver Transportation Policy Institute, a single parking spot can typically store 12 bicycles. Up to 20 bicycles can be stored in a two-tiered rack, such as the ones at Portland State University. We recommend that the space for bicycle parking could and should come from on-site automobile parking space before it reaches into habitable space, and that any applicants appealing to bicycle requirements first demonstrate that additional space to meet the new rules could not come from on-site auto parking first. I understand the appeal to delay implementation of the code for projects already in planning, but I worry that such workarounds will leave the members of ABC empty-handed after 8 years of organizing around better storage for their communities. There are two major developments and redevelopments happening at their sites in the next few years. I ask that you hear their story and take it to heart while you're making this vital decision. I also want to note that as a bicycle retail and service business, we have an obvious interest in more folks having access to bicycling as an option for their mode share. As density increases in our city, folks more and more will need to find alternatives to single occupancy vehicle. The bicycle industry is a sizable and growing portion of Portland's business community. As you can see through Peloton, Irvington Gardens, Velo Apartments, and other bicycle-branded developments, a thriving bicycle economy and infrastructure adds value to our properties. Solving this problem of bicycle storage is critical if we are serious about meeting various plans adopted citywide from mode split to climate change goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. 4 seconds to spare.
I know.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Edward LeClaire. I'm a parent, 2 kids, and I'm here to ask you to support this code because of the increases for schools. And I want to share my experience with Portland Public Schools, some good, some bad. My younger kid's elementary school, a number of years ago, he was in kindergarten. I'm raising bicyclists. We're parking out front. Traffic is awful every day. All the parents want to drive their kids because traffic is scary and you don't want your kids to have to navigate traffic. School sends out an email saying, remember, bikes should avoid traffic, have the kids, circumnavigate all the traffic and park behind the school. And that made me furious, and I got active. And we formed a bike club, and we started doing bike trains every single Friday that are still going on. It's a neighborhood tradition. And PBOT was a great partner, helped us get extra bike racks out in front of the school. School now has a couple of corrals out in the street that are full every single day. And the other racks in front of the school are also full now every single day. And it's a beautiful thing to see when you see bikes out front people who drive or bike, they think, oh, this is a place people can ride bikes to. So it's really necessary to have them there. Compare that to when my other kid went to middle school. It's a middle school of about 500 kids. The bike racks are overflowing. You've got 6th, 7th, and 8th graders going there who are now free and expected to ride bikes. They've got about 40 bike racks plus, or enough racks for 40 bikes plus or minus for 500 kids. And if you do the rough math, that's less than 10%. And that's not going to get anywhere near the goal we have of getting to 25%. I think our goal was 25% mode split for bike riding. And especially for kids, I mean, I think it should be 50 or 90%. And the principal there I'm trying to work with, and PBOT is saying, yeah, I've got bike racks. And for 3 years, they're just giving me the runaround. They don't want to make the decision. They don't want to make the tough call to either take away some parking spots or take up some of the space for bike parking. And this is why it's imperative to have a code change to make the schools do it. And I realize that, going forward, it's only going to deal with certain capital dollar amount changes to force them, but it will also empower advocates at other schools that aren't doing those changes can go to the principal and say, hey, this will bring your school up to code now if you get these. That's right. That's why it's imperative that we do that. We need the next generation to be riding bikes, and we need to support them doing that. Thank you kindly. I also wanted to point out in my last 20 seconds, I was very impressed with how this process went, and it's a great example of how this city does work. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your advocacy.
Excellent.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is RJ Shepard. I'm the co-chair of Bike Loud PDX, a grassroots bike advocacy organization. First, a big thanks to the Commissioner Smith over at the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission, as well as also the staff who have put this together over at PBOT and BPS. I do want to take a quick moment to give my deepest gratitude to both the Families for Safe Streets and the Street Trust this morning, as well as also you, Commissioner and Mayor and Commissioner Hardesty and Fitz as well, for proclaiming this Sunday as Remembrance Day for traffic victims, and also for reaffirming your support for Vision Zero. We all know that 44 people have died as a result of traffic violence this year. And we see people getting out of their cars as a critical component to addressing those Vision Zero goals. And this plan, this bike parking update, I think is a critical part of that. So that's why Bike Loud PDX strongly encourages council adopt the recommended draft. As you heard today, people don't have secure bike parking, whether that's even at their homes, at their work, at transit stops even. And currently our code completely leaves out adaptive and cargo bikes, which are increasingly becoming more popular. The 2018 ACS survey, American Community Survey, saw that nearly 50% of Multnomah County residents are rent burdened, meaning that they're spending more than 30% of their income on rent. And so having bicycle parking can help reduce these transportation costs and kind of return back to them a green dividend, as it's called sometimes in Portland, to be able to afford the necessities like food and diapers and so on. We also see that bicycles are a critical part of the sustainable transportation system. So the what's often referred to as the walk shed to a transit stop. For 10 minutes, you might be able to get half a mile, but on a bike, you can travel 1.5 miles in that same 10 minutes. So that's 9 times the area that's served by a transit stop. So having this bicycle parking is critical as part of that. We also want to support, we're glad to see that cargo and adaptive bikes are being included in this code. We certainly support the work of Biketown and other disability rights groups to expand adaptive bikes as part of our transportation system. And the mobility landscape is also changing. Last year, Germany sold over 1 million e-bikes, but only 36,000 electric vehicles. So e-bikes are a real game changer for riders who are elderly, disabled, have families, or just want an extra boost up the Portland Hills. And I strongly encourage you guys to try the e-bikes that you have upstairs. I'm not sure if you can do that for your ride home or something. But in summary, Bike Loud strongly encourages council to embrace this.
Great, thank you. And on that last point, so in my office, we have e-bikes. We de-emphasized automobiles. And as somebody who wasn't really sure, I commute by bike. I don't have an e-bike personally, but I do borrow the city e-bike for our office.
Yeah.
And it is a game changer. If you don't think it's for you, I would encourage people to test drive one.
Definitely.
Rent one.
I know the Fourth Mobility folks have one at the World Trade Center, so if you ever want to ride one, for anybody who's watching, feel free to go to the Fourth folks, and they'll let you test drive stuff there. And maybe even having one at City Council for people to try, I think would be really awesome as well.
It's a great idea. I mean, they really are a lot of fun, and it's fun to see the double takes when you're going up a steep hill and you're passing everybody else, and there's kind of what just happened.
Absolutely.
But thank you for that, and thank you for your leadership and your advocacy. It's good to see you here again. Thank you, all three of you. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Kevin Clark, Michael Harrison, and Diane Lynn.
Greetings, welcome. Would you like to go ahead, sir?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Kevin Clark, speaking on behalf of Oregon Smart Growth, which supports policies that encourage multimodal, compact development that is economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable. We have consistently supported the Bike Code project's main goal: ensure Portlanders have access to adequate, secure, and convenient bicycle parking at their homes and destinations. We also advocated for flexibility to provide in-unit bike parking, a convenient and secure option many residents prefer. We appreciate that we've been met and have a proposal today that allows 50% of required bike parking to be met in unit and up to 100% in smaller projects. However, the Planning and Sustainability Commission also recommended design standards that call for in-unit bike parking to be located within 15 feet of the front door and located in a closet or alcove. For many projects, this overly prescriptive requirement for a dedicated enclosed closet or alcove means in-unit parking won't be feasible. A dedicated in-unit bike parking closet or alcove will add cost to housing by decreasing efficiency and quantity of homes produced. According to project staff, the Bureau of Development Services is already concerned that these design standards could add time and complexity to the permitting process, further complicating housing production. And the Planning and Sustainability Commission itself was split, voting 5-3 to advance this design standard, their narrowest decision across dozens of proposed bike parking code amendments. We understand and support the intention behind the design standards to prevent poorly designed in-unit bike parking, where the bike is difficult to access or interferes with living space. Staff noted the intent was to prevent bike parking placed over beds or in unusable locations within the unit. We agree with that intent. However, the new requirement to create a dedicated enclosed in-unit bike closet or alcove goes too far. Oregon Smart Growth urges the council to make a simple amendment to the in-unit design standards. Keep the 15-foot requirement, but remove the problematic located in a closet or alcove language. As an alternative, replace it with language staff included in a February 1st menu of potential amendments. Bicycle parking cannot be in bedrooms, kitchen, or bathroom. We believe this updated design standard fulfills the intent to prevent poorly placed in-unit bike parking without compromising the feasibility of in-unit spaces, furthering the overall goals of the Bike Code project without negatively impacting the cost or livability of housing units. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you all, too. My name is Diane Lynn, Executive Director of Proud Ground, and on the Portland Housing Advisory Commission, and I'm here representing PHAC, as we call it. We work with the Portland Housing Bureau to really look at policy impacts on housing affordability, and I'm here to share just a few angles on this policy that I think we'd like you to hear. We're not offering a specific amendment. We really appreciated the delay so that projects in the middle of design could have time to really manage through this. Clearly, it's critically important, and I think the testimony earlier for people of color needing this bike space is very important. And at the same time, we have to be very smart about how it would impact other elements within the housing affordability buildings that are being developed and being designed all around the city. We understand that flexibility within the code is very difficult to achieve, and and we run the risk in some cases of having bike parking affects the habitability of some of the spaces with affordable units. Proud Ground is a developer of affordable housing, along with Habitat for Humanity and other agencies we work very close with, and we're just wanted to put it out there that we're concerned about how we pay for and support achieving this value that this bike parking code change represents, and also recognizing the implications of the additional requirements in buildings that have layers and layers of requirements, again, representing other values the city holds dear. So our message here today is please be conscious of when all the bureaus come to you with these kinds of code changes and the impact it has on the affordable housing efforts. We want everybody to have these amenities, especially lower income families, for all the reasons you've heard already. We support that. And at the same time, we have to consider what it means to try to kind of overload buildings that have so many requirements and so many goals to try to achieve. Our 5020 condo project, for example, that will accommodate preference policy families in Northeast Portland, could have lost a unit of housing or maybe a bedroom in our building had this had to be applied at this point in time. Again, let's balance these values, be very thoughtful about the implications, and consider the cost involved going forward. We appreciate your time and attention. You have a letter from PHAC, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Diane. It's good seeing you again.
So
Commissioner Fritz?
I'll need a clarification from staff. I heard earlier that the FAR, indoor bike parking, didn't count towards the FAR, the floor area ratio. Does the alcove pass count towards the floor area ratio?
Well, it's just a matter of, I call these buildings kind of a Rubik's Cube. There's so many requirements. You have to fit units in certain ways, and we're trying to achieve family-size units, so, and achieve higher square footage for family sizes. So it may affect the alcove, it may not. It's just a matter of how you shove everything into one of these complex buildings. So you have only a certain amount of FAR in a building.
Right, but
and you got to make it all fit.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Would this count towards the total FAR, or is it above and on top of that? And I'll get the answer from staff later.
I think it counts towards the FAR.
So maybe if that might be a potential solution.
Thank you for that consideration. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Daley.
Diane, I really appreciate your testimony. You know I'm a huge fan of Proud Ground, and I'm going to take everything you say seriously. However, after listening to the community members from ABC, it's really disappointing to realize that there has been community demand for bike parking in low-income or affordable housing developments for a long time, and those developers aren't seeming to be very responsive to that. And contrary to the myth out there that cyclists are wealthy or affluent white people, the fact is people who live on low incomes are more likely to bike and walk and depend on bikes than their more affluent neighbors who have cars. And especially when you're talking about family-sized units, kids need bikes. So of course I don't want to see units eliminated, but we can't just disregard this need. So you said you don't have a specific amendment, but I'm wondering, what is the proposed solution?
It's just a balancing act, Commissioner, and that's the hardest thing. We don't want to lose bedrooms for bike parking. We want bike parking. Our building has a lot of bike parking in it, and we have accommodated it aggressively. This takes it to another level, and I understand all the reasons why. It's simply the challenge of public policy development is those balances. So we're happy to work with you on the nuances that help us achieve both of those things at the same time. We just wanted to show up and just share with you the implications of these kinds of decisions so we can be conscious of them going forward.
Okay.
Look forward to working with you.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Michael Harrison. I work at OHSU. I'm here today to thank PBOT staff and the Planning and Sustainability Commission for recognizing the important role that OHSU's Bike Valet plays in encouraging our employees to bike to work. Yes, the code before you requires OHSU to build hundreds of additional bike parking spaces for bike commuting. We've already begun planning for these spaces, spaces that will be secure and covered. But the code also lets us continue to operate our bike valet that's underneath the tram, which is extremely popular with our employees as it provides a safer and less strenuous way for people to reach the hospital and research facilities on Markham Hill. I wish I could say we foresaw when the tram was built how popular the bike valet would be, but the truth is there were 12 bike parking spaces built with the tram.
Wow.
Within the first year, demand had grown to 165 bikes per day. And this last year, we had 335 bikes on average per day. So this isn't 335 on a sunny day. This is year-round, 335 on average. The facility is sized to flex up to 100 more bike riders on a sunny day than that. OHSU is enthusiastic about continuing our efforts to support active transportation through ample bike parking, transit incentives, pricing, and programming. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thanks, all three of you. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Alexandra Zimmerman, Mike Hull, and Jillian Detweiler.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Alexandra Zimmerman, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of your Portland Bicycle Advisory Committee. The BAC is very pleased to support the recommended draft and the proposed updates to Bicycle Parking Chapter Title 33 of Zoning Code. We know as Portland continues to grow, and unfortunately our bicycle ridership has been shown decline, it's imperative that our new development and the major redevelopment provide adequate, secure, and convenient short and long-term bike parking. If we want to reach our goal of that 25% bike mode split in the transportation system plan, if we want to do anything about reducing the 40% of greenhouse gas emissions that we create in Oregon by transportation, and we want vibrant neighborhoods where 80% of people can walk or bike to fulfill their basic daily needs in our climate action plan outline, we must do all we can as a city to increase the access to these end-of-trip facilities to support biking as a valuable mode of transportation. We know that the bike parking code was written over 20 years ago and it's outdated. It no longer serves everyday Portlanders in shifting their modes away from traveling by car. We've heard today that research shows that the lack of a secure place to park a bike is a real barrier to traveling for transportation, recreation, to access everyday goods and services, to spend time with your family. To keep pace with the cities around the country and across the globe, we really urge Council today to adopt this recommended draft and move forward with the proposed updates, including all the amendments adopted by the PSC. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Hull. I am with a bicycle parking vendor product company, Urban Racks.
Okay.
So I haven't provided anything, I apologize, but I was kind of impromptu asked to speak a little bit to the vendor side of things. As somebody who works closely with developers in providing products for them to put into their buildings, of course, they're always looking for cost savings and space efficiencies and those sorts of things. So specifically, it was mentioned about the two-tier parking products having lift assist is really important because they're not applicable to everybody. We talk about the variance in ridership and the abilities of people. Not everybody has a carbon fiber bike that weighs next to nothing, and so lifting that up, even on vertical racks, can be difficult for some people. So that is a key component that needs to be addressed. The other side of it is, as you can imagine, in the Pacific Northwest and Portland specifically, bike parking or biking as an industry is big business. And so everybody from pipe vendors to, large bike infrastructure specific companies are in this market. And there is definitely different standards that absolutely need to be adhered to when we're talking about what makes a good bicycle parking product that securely or that a bike can be securely locked to so that it's there when you get back. Pre and post trip are the most important thing for cyclists You know, it was mentioned earlier how important and the impact of someone who may have their bike stolen, what that does to them. So having guidelines to make sure, that good products are provided that are going to serve those needs and make sure that people do have their bike when they come back to get it is very important. And that's why I would urge you to consider these amendments.
I'm interested in this lift assist because I'm too short to use the regular bike parking area in my apartment, so
Yes.
my bike is with the children's bikes, and I feel a little silly.
It's not unusual. That is definitely a major concern and something that we try to address with, providing part of the challenge too is not just providing one type of product, right? Like there was mention of less than 50% vertical racks, which is, a really good thing. And of course, it was also mentioned cargo bikes, ADA, those sorts of things that as this industry is changing so quickly. E-bikes was another thing, and that's hugely impacting the products that we need to provide as well. So there's such a wide variety of users and bikes and, this and that, and trying to accommodate all of those can be extremely difficult. So having the option to provide multitude of options, but also within the guidelines too, is essential.
Very good, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Jillian Detweiler. I'm the Executive Director of the Street Trust, and we're here to support the update of bike parking standards. I just thought I'd mention that we have used Metro RTO Regional Transportation Options funding to assist Rose CDC to buy bike parking and install it for its residents. I hope we're moving quickly on a path that we're no longer, creating an unmet demand with new development. And this hearing and the testimony of ABC really makes me want to redouble the Street Trust efforts to address, the huge backlog of all of the existing buildings. I hear it from my staff, and we heard it today from residents of affordable housing. And I've had the opportunity, for some reason, to spend quite a bit of time with the council the last few days, and I actually wonder if PSEF could ultimately be a source of funding because helping people to ride bicycles would move towards our greenhouse gas emission goals. So it's something we might explore as well as RTO funding, but I hope we're on a path to get bike parking in new development. I would not favor the approach that was described by the Smart Growth Oregon representative. I think the PSC spent a lot of time developing the code, and architects were involved in that. And we're a partner to address the deficit that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jillian. It's good seeing you again. And yes, you've been spending a lot of time here, and we appreciate it. Thank
Sure.
you. Thanks, all three of you.
Thank you.
Next three, please, Carla.
That's all who signed up.
All right, very good. So colleagues, did you want to bring staff back? Did you have further questions?
You can just get back to me on the answer about.
Oh, I have a couple questions.
All right, Commissioner Daly has a couple questions. Come on up. Thanks again. Thank you, everybody who testified. That was good testimony.
So just for clarity, could one of you just briefly explain the choice between having a dedicated room and having in-unit bike parking? Like, we're setting some minimums and requirements, but could a developer provide all of the bike parking in a room or a minimum of 50? I guess I'll just walk you through. And if they only provide 50%, then they would have to provide in-unit parking for a commensurate number of units. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, so
And-
it's the option. So we
Okay.
allow up to 50% as an option if that project wants to.
And I mean, I have to say, it seems that there's such high demand for bike parking, and there's so many vacant units in the city now that are mostly unaffordable to most renters, but that not having bike parking is going to make these properties less competitive.
I mean.
You don't have to.
Yeah. I mean,
confirm that or deny it.
we've heard talking to property managers, talking to developers. I mean, and I think they've cited some of the apartments on Williams that bike parking, that biking is used as a marketing tool.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I would imagine so.
So-
And so this touches on multi-dwelling units, commercial zones, school sites. We don't address transit hubs. Is there, or we do? Could you,
Yeah.
I couldn't.
So
Here is the code update, everyone. I didn't read every page, I'm gonna admit it right now.
So if you-
I've been well briefed, but yeah, because that's a issue I'm really interested in. We're seeing a lot of affordable housing development in areas where public transportation isn't adequate to get people all the places that they need to go. And so they may be more reliant on bicycles to get to the transit. But once they get there, is there a safe, secure place for them to park their bikes? And I think that is an excellent interim solution while we anxiously await better, more frequent, and increased bus service across the city. So,
So on
what's
page
the page?
43 of the recommended draft, you'll see the table 2666, which is our minimum required amounts. And under basic utilities.
2666, I thought you, okay, I got it, yes.
So the category of use is basic utilities, and then we have transit centers. So
there we go.
Yeah, and then light rail stations. And one of the things that we did as part of this update was really recognizing that previously, the previous code just had one standard. It was 8 long-term spaces per transit station or transit station before, and really sort of thinking that we know that transit centers will have a different use and a different demand than our light rail stations. And then obviously we'll have a higher demand in our standard A, which is central city and inner neighborhoods, and slightly lower for.
So these seem like really small numbers relative to our goal of 25% mode split. Why are they so low?
So TriMet was part of our stakeholder advisory committee, and some of this, again, is just sort of that nuance on how their new projects come about. There's definitely a commitment from TriMet to include bicycle parking, and so we were trying to figure out, again, with code and across the board, this is the baseline. This is a meeting that bare minimum, and so working with them, looking at the different transit centers and what's available and the space that's available at those transit centers. That's sort of how we got to these numbers. Again, I know commitments, can change. They look at these as the very baseline, but they can use this number in their grants and things. And so a lot of that was around that conversation with TriMet, looking at their past projects, and again, bringing it up from the 8 that was in current code.
I'm just thinking about cities that have much more impressive mode shares, and they have space for hundreds, maybe even thousands of bicycles, not dozens. So I'm concerned about that.
Yeah.
So I'll just put one just sort of blanket statement out there. Wow, it's been a long day. Apparently I
has
can't
been a
speak
long day.
anymore. This is not a code that is intended for the short term. This is a code that is intended for the long term. And I want to acknowledge some of the arguments that people make in the near term. They say, it is not safe for me to bike in my community today. And therefore, by requiring this kind of bicycle parking that is secure, that is safe, that is easily accessible, you are adding to the cost of housing, and you're pushing people out of housing. I hear that argument a lot. Again, this is not just about today. In fact, it's taken 5 years to get this set of ordinances to where they are today. This is a 10, 15, 20, 25-year play. This is for buildings that will be around for a long, long time. Through the Housing Bureau, when we invest in workforce and affordable housing, we're building for 100 years. And so it is not only my hope, but it is my firm expectation that the mode share will change precipitously in the next decade or so. And so we're talking about, really, for buildings that are just being designed, we're talking about their literal infancy in terms of their, where they are in their life cycle. And so it's very important that we start somewhere, and this is an important place to start. Bicycling isn't for everyone. I want to be very clear about that. I understand that. And we are also looking at other modes, including transit. We're looking at ways to make our roads safer. We're looking at ways to make our city more walkable for people who choose to walk. We're obviously looking at all kinds of different transit innovations and revolutions that'll take hold over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years. This is just one piece of the puzzle. And I know it can work because I've seen it work in other cities, not only here in the United States, but around the world. And so I think it's very important that we push forward on this, even though, yes, in the short term, there will be some adjustments to be made. That being said, I think it's very important that we move forward. If we're serious about the climate action goals, and we talk about them a lot here, if we want to actually meet those goals rather than just talk about them, then this is the kind of policy where we need to lead, and we will. So thank you for your report, colleagues. Thank you for your hard work on this. Thank you for everybody who testified, particularly those of you who've been working on this for 5 years. It's impressive work, and I'm glad to see where it is, and we're within spitting distance of getting it across the finish line. So these are both non-emergency ordinances, so we will not be taking a vote today on either the amendments or on the base ordinance. We will be moving them to second reading. The oral record is closed, but if people wish to continue to send us information via email, of course, we will consider that. So item number 1048.
Mayor, yeah, I'm sorry, we need to set a time certain, correct?
Yeah,
Do we?
so we need,
Why?
yes, because it's a land use item, and you're going to take a vote on the amendments at the next meeting. So
Very
you
good.
need a time certain.
All right, so we obviously need space for both. And when do you propose? And I'd like it to be on a day where we can all be here, if that's possible. Carla?
It's just vote.
It's a
just a
vote,
vote.
it's a vote on the
But
amendments.
I like to give long speeches when I cast a
Well,
vote on something this
So
important.
they'll need to vote on the amendments, and then they'll need to roll it to another
Another
reading
date,
for the final
correct.
vote.
Okay,
Also
so-
needs a time certain.
So what we're picking is a date for the vote on the amendments. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
So if that's next week, then I have 11:20 on the 20th, that's Wednesday morning.
Great.
I know we're all here.
Just Commissioner Hardesty is not, but she's gone the following week as well.
Then we'll take it.
So
We'll take it.
ele-
If she wishes to submit written testimony, I'll read it in the chamber. I'll read it on the record.
Commissioner Udaley, you'll be gone on the 27th, which sounds like the final vote
Of
That's-
November.
of November.
I can call in for that. If not, just come in.
Great.
So just so we're clear, 11:20 next Wednesday, which is
The 20, Wednesday.
so 11:20 at 11:20 in the morning on the 11:20, 11 November 20th, sorry. And then the oral record is closed, so there'll be no oral testimony next week, but the written record remains open until the next hearing.
Yes, unless either of my colleagues have an objection to keeping the open. I personally, I'd like to, if people have thoughts based on what they heard today, I'd certainly like to hear from them via email. Very good. So 10:48, first reading of a non-emergency ordinance moves to 11:20 on Wednesday, 11:20. 10:49, first reading of a non-emergency ordinance moves to 11:20 on Wednesday, 11:20. Next item, 1050, 1050, time certain 3:30.
Item 1050, urge our federal government to engage in diplomacy with Iran.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, colleagues, for being here. And thank you, everybody who's here for this item. And if you could come forward if you're part of the first, of the presenters. First, I acknowledge Michiko Kornhauser and Carol Erner, who are acknowledged in the resolution for their dedication to the eradication of nuclear weapons. Michiko is a Hiroshima survivor, and will be sharing their story with us during invited testimony. And Carol, who organized the first Hiroshima and Nagasaki Memorial in Portland in 1962, is in the audience today. Thank you both for your work. On behalf of the City of Portland, I thank the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility for their advocacy and collaboration in producing this resolution. This last summer, the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility communicated to Portland City Council a request for the council's support and passage of a resolution to declare the City of Portland's opposition to nuclear weapons and to urge the United States federal government to sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and take action to prevent nuclear war. This resolution would allow the City of Portland to join cities and elected officials from across the country and around the world in formally supporting the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And after all, this really, people might say, why are you wading into this policy? This is a federal issue. But we all know that if there is a nuclear strike, it's going to be against a city. And therefore is absolutely of great concern to us as the City of Portland, and we want to be in solidarity and on record with cities all over the country and all over the world to make sure that our voices are heard. And this is something that we can do. We sometimes feel like, I certainly feel like we can't necessarily affect what the federal government does, although this resolution does call on contacting the Oregon delegation with our plea. But we can make a statement of our values, and so I appreciate everybody being here today. So first, I'd like to welcome...
Commissioner Fritz,
yes.
before you call up the panel, the council clerk has informed me that we need to read the other item. We can take them up separately, but apparently...
Well, I had the wrong numbering on mine, so I read the old 1050, and you want the declare city opposition.
Well, my understanding is the Tuesday memo clarified these in the order that they currently show up on the agenda.
It did, but my numbering here is wrong still. That's why I read the old titles first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so you need to read the one.
I trust Carla. If Carla says we need to do something, we need to do something.
So she'll go ahead and read it, Carla, and then we'll be good with
Make sure I got the right one.
the
Yeah,
rules.
so this is declare city's opposition to nuclear weapons and urge the U.S. federal government to sign the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and take action to prevent nuclear war.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
Yes.
Commissioner Fritz, sorry.
Thank you. So please come on up. Shizu Hata is an Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility Advisory Board and Peace Work Group member, and will give an overview of the resolution. And I'm going to be asking you to time, folks, since we're running a bit late. So if you could give 5 minutes, please, for this first speaker. Welcome. I apologize.
Hi.
I probably messed up your name.
It's fine. Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners.
Welcome.
My name is Chisao Hata, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility to support and pass the resolution that you mentioned. Since 1981, the Physicians for Social Responsibility has been known as PSR, began when doctors and health professionals recognized that there was no cure to nuclear war, and that it was their professional obligation to prevent a nuclear war from happening. For their continued dedication, the international affiliate of PSR was awarded the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize, and PSR also gave birth to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, also known as ICAN, which was awarded the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for their work to urge the U.S. government to sign the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which was ultimately supported by 122 nations. Global cities support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and by passing this resolution today, you join other city leaders from a dozen U.S. cities and more than 100 cities from around the world. We urge you to add Portland to the list of cities. We also remind you that Portland has been a Mayors for Peace city since 1988, supporting the call for mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to abolish nuclear weapons. We thank Commissioner Amanda Fitz for working with Oregon PSR chapter leadership and partnering organizations to bring this and the next resolution supporting diplomacy with Iran to your attention and active vote. We also celebrate and honor our state leadership who passed Senate Joint Memorial 5 and hundreds of Portlanders who have signed a petition in support of the nuclear ban treaty. All of these are detailed in the submitted testimony. We in the Pacific Northwest have a direct link to the manufacturing of the only atomic bombs used on the planet. Plutonium for the bomb that devastated Hiroshima and Nagasaki was produced at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which also sits on top of multiple fault lines. Our Columbia River is a mighty natural source affecting how all of us live and survive. Unfortunately, the work to prevent nuclear war is as urgent today as ever. And we will hear in testimony today that nuclear weapons have already harmed and destroyed lives here in Portland. Portlanders pay millions in taxes to support nuclear weapons, which deprives our citizens of funds for education, health, and climate justice. Fortunately, there is a way out of this nightmare. By supporting this resolution, you become leaders in the movement for nuclear sanity. The resolution resolves to pursue two complementary paths to nuclear disarmament. First, it supports legislature at the federal level that decreases the risk of nuclear war. Secondly, it supports the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This resolution also, as you mentioned, recognizes dedicated, fierce, and gracious activists who have given their lives to the nuclear-free world. As an artist, it is my job to create, not destroy. As a mother and as a grandmother, I want to leave a legacy of protecting our natural world. As a person of color, we have continued to be brutalized in America and by America. As a Sansei, third-generation Japanese American, my immigrant grandparents came to America from Hiroshima for a better life. As a human being, I want us to be safe, and I want us to connect and build lasting relationships and celebrate our American diversity. As a citizen of the United States, and as a Portlander whose history is threaded deep in the fabric of this city, I urge you to pass this resolution today.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was beautiful. Our next first invited panel, Michiko Kornhauser is an atomic bomb survivor. State Representative Torna Sanchez was the chief sponsor of the state version of this resolution, which was SJM. You'll tell me what SJM stands for.
5, Senate Joint Memorial.
Senate Joint Memorial 5. And retired Commander Harvey Thornstead is a member of Veterans for Peace Chapter 72 and the National Association of Atomic Veterans. Welcome, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
And
My
3
name
minutes
is
each, please.
Michiko Kornhauser. I came to Oregon, Portland in 1986. I have been speaking to students and others, including federal government employees, to share my story so as to send my message about how cruel the World War II was, because there must be something better to solve the conflicts between the nations instead of killing each other. The Pacific War started in 1941 when I was 6 years old. During the war, I lived less than 100 miles east of Hiroshima. By 1944, American fighter planes began to fly over us to shoot anybody they could find. I wondered what the war was for. After all, we were not soldiers, we were kids. March 10th, 1945, fire bombs dropped from B-29s killed more than 100,000 civilians in Tokyo alone. 3 months later, my city, Okayama, was destroyed in the same way. I lost 25% of my classmates. Soon after that, the school teachers took the remaining students to a countryside away from the city to be safe. On August the 6th, we were playing outside. Sky was blue and beautiful, but then suddenly we were covered with grayish ash. The teachers shouted, "Go and run to the river and wash yourselves." So we did. But when we got there, the river was covered with grayish ash. That night, a teacher told us that a huge bomb fell over Hiroshima and the entire city was destroyed. We then knew where the ash came from. Then 3 days later, we heard that another bomb fell over Nagasaki. The 2 atomic bombs dropped over Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed more than 200,000 people. On August the 15th, the war ended, and we came home. But the city was a shambles, and soon my baby brother starved to death. At that time, my mother had a teenage boy living with us because his parents had been killed during the bombing. This boy had an older brother working in Hiroshima, so he went to Hiroshima to look for his brother. He walked all over the city and finally found his brother dead in a ditch. He had his brother cremated and buried and came back to live with us. As September came, our school started. Then one day, when I got up, I noticed fallen hair scattered over the pillow of this boy. He was taken to the hospital, and soon after that, he died of radiation sickness. He never saw the atomic bomb explode. He only walked around the city after the bomb was dropped, looking for his brother. Now this entire family was gone. I often think about the ash that fell over us in the countryside. It must have been radioactive too. In 1961, I came to the East-West Center at the University of Hawaii. The following July, in 1942, America exploded a nuclear bomb over Johnson Islands. I saw the most hideous-looking mushroom clouds spreading over Waikiki Beach in the middle of the night. And the next day, I was drenched with radioactive rain. I often wonder why I'm still living in this world. Do we want our children to experience something like this that I had gone through? I don't think so. Then we have to work together towards something better for the sake of our children. Look at the Fukushima nuclear power station in Japan, which was a peaceful use of nuclear power, but the facility was destroyed by the earthquake and tsunami. There is a tremendous concern now over cancer in people caused by this accident. Recently, they abandoned the use of the facility. If the peaceful use of nuclear power is this dangerous, what effect will it have on us as weapons? I strongly hope that the leaders of the world will realize how precious this earth is, and we should not be dropping or shooting up nuclear bombs. Instead, think about the safety of the living creatures on this earth. Without peace, there is nothing here for us to live on. This earth is simply too small to think about that seriously. Not to think about that seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing. And colleagues, you can see why my staff and I thought this was so important to bring this to council. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Representative.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Tana Sanchez. I'm the state representative for House District 43, North and Northeast Portland. I don't know if I need to say a whole lot now, actually. This is why. But let me just say, the Senate Joint Memorial 5 that was passed in the legislature this past year really does mean exactly this. It really is about we as human beings and what we are doing to ourselves. Over and over again, we've recognized when we've made mistakes, and things like lead in pipes was not safe. Things like lead in paint was not safe. Asbestos was not safe. We thought things were all great and wonderful at one point because they did really wonderful things, but we know now they're not safe. We've known that nuclear energy is not safe for a very, very long time, and we know that it's dangerous, and certainly more dangerous in the hands of the wrong people. We know that Hanford is still a very dangerous place to be. And as a member of the Hanford Cleanup Commission, I can tell you, every single time I've been there or been even in the area, it makes me nervous because the tunnels have collapsed. There is still the danger of leaks. There is still problems. It still sits next to our mighty river. This is a dangerous thing, and I mean, everyone knows that. There's nothing we need to say any more about that. All we have to do is do something about it now. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sanchez. We appreciate it.
I'm Harvey Thursted, Commander, U.S. Navy, retired. I strongly support this resolution and the follow-on resolution for diplomacy with Iran. I represent two organizations, Veterans for Peace, who has had as their mission for decades the abolishment of nuclear weapons and to use diplomacy in place of war. We have seen war. We know how terrible it is. I also represent the National Association of Atomic Veterans. I'm an atomic veteran by reason of having witnessed 33 airbursts over Christmas Island at a distance of approximately 22 miles. At the time, we had dosimeters, film badges, and they all checked us out and says, hey, you're within safe limits. A number of years later, I had thyroid problems and had half a thyroid removed and discovered that one of the earliest indications of radiation poisoning is thyroid problems. The standards of the time were inadequate. Nuclear accidents happen. I was within 24 seconds of being at ground zero for a nuclear airburst due to a nuclear accident. It happened like this. I was aboard the support ship, the USS Muncie, off Christmas Island. Our job was to first lay a moor in over 2 miles of water, a single point moor, and then to haul a barge out prior to the nuclear blast to set a target for the Air Force coming over so high you couldn't hear them. A single point moor moves around in the water, and it was dark. So one time we had a little problem finding the moor. So we're running late. We did find it, and we set up the target, set our motor generator set off to give the signals to the Air Force as to where they should drop their bomb. And then we're going as fast as we can to get out of there because we were late. We're pre-dawn, still dark, listening up on the bridge. Myself, 79 other members of the crew. We hear this is Air Force 76, target acquired, 1 minute countdown. A bit later, we hear over the speaker, 30 seconds, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. I say hold count. I say again, hold count. This is Navy Christmas. This is Air Force 76. What's the problem? Over. This Navy Christmas, the support on the beach. We vector that you have targeted the support ship. Vice target. Over.
Oh, no.
That was us. It was that close. Nuclear accidents happen. Even if they're not intended, it can start a war that can destroy the world. Myself and my organizations I represent strongly recommend support of the 2 resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Well, this is more than gripping testimony. I appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Gives us a whole new lease on life being where we are,
Yeah.
even after a long day. Thank you. It's really important that you were
Thank you.
here. We just have 2 more invited testimony, and I believe we have 4 signed up to testify. Kiana Angelo is a Marshallese community member and founder of Living Islands, as well as a board member with the Alliance National Network. And Yukio, I'm messing this up, sorry. Yukio Kawa is the 3rd generation Hibakucha and will be sharing her personal story. And again, I apologize for messing up your names. Please tell me how to say it right.
Good afternoon.
You said my name correctly.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
exciting.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, for your time and hard work you do in our great city of Portland, Oregon. Today, I'm here in the Portland City Hall to speak on behalf of the Marshallese people concerning our nuclear legacy. The Republic of Marshall Islands is in the region of Micronesia in the Pacific, known as the home of the most important U.S. military base in the Pacific region, Kwajalein. Also, we are known for the dome, Runit Dome. Facts state that Marshall Islands, Runit Dome, holds more than 3.1 cubic feet or 35 Olympic-sized pools of U.S.-produced radioactive soil and debris, including lethal amount of plutonium. My name is Kiana Judah Angelo. I was born on a small outer island in 1973. I was adopted and brought here, and I was raised in Vancouver, Washington by an American family. I attended private schools in Portland, Oregon, where I live today. I am fortunate and blessed to have had the opportunity to found and co-found 2 major nonprofits here in Portland that also serves our Marshallese communities along with Kofa and Micronesian Islanders. It's called Living Islands and Kofa Alliance National Network CAN. My biological family is here in Oregon and throughout the Pacific Northwest. Everywhere I have lived, I have been under constant threat of nuclear weapons. And today, my children are living with that same very threat. My Marshallese family is dying rapidly, most of them from cancers, heart issues, and thyroid disorders. For example, one of our greatest in the Marshall Islands, Darlene Keju, a world-recognized Marshallese nuclear activist, one of my idols, fought for nuclear-free planets in the 70s and 80s, but lost to cancer. My uncle, Tony DeBroom, former minister of the Marshall Islands, fought the world for climate justice and global security, but lost to cancer. My niece, who was just 19 years old when she was told to take ibuprofen for the cancer that took her life. My own children, all four, all have heart issues. This year, like every year, I have been to 10 times more funerals among my Marshallese family than my adopted family. Most of them young and old, suffering from cancers, degenerated disease caused by nuclear legacy. All of them died too early. But nuclear legacy is not only about those we lose. Those who survive equally are hurt. In the 6 years that my nonprofits have operated, I heard countless of stories about displacement, about mental and physical problems. Many Marshallese have lost their land and their ocean, their way of life. They gave their land to America, which promised them world peace in exchange for nuclear testings. Who were we to refuse world peace? The Marshallese people fulfilled their part of the deal. It's time for the world to fulfill its parts. As we know, the nuclear weapons industry is massive and expensive industry. Money that could be better spent elsewhere, for example, cybersecurity or stabilizing the Pacific region through programs like USAID. Money that the state of Oregon and the city of Portland can certainly spend better on homelessness, schools, perhaps improved health and dental care for our elders. Instead, it's spent on nuclear weapons that's making the United States and the world less safe. Massive indiscriminatory weapons that kill regardless religion, age, gender, and political views. We already have something like 6,185 nuclear weapons. Do we really need more? We are so proud of the support of Oregon Physicians of Social Responsibility for shedding light on this particular heavy subject. And I just want to say that we are so proud of you, members of the City Council, for listening to us and giving your time and consideration. For us, the Marshallese people who migrated to Oregon and other U.S. states, this is our new borrowed home. This is our new way of life. We want our voices to be heard concerning our nuclear legacy. We want to bring our stories concerning nuclear weapons to the forefront. We want to warn our new local communities of what we have been through, because we do not want our new communities to repeat that same history. We are merely trying to survive. We will never forget I'll never forget standing on Rongelap and Bikini Atoll. The deafening sounds of silence, only the sounds of waves and palms in the wind. And just to remind you, Bikini is where a lot of the testing was done, and Rongelap was where the downwinders were. That moment I was scared. I didn't feel anything. I didn't like the idea that the whole world could be like this, including our beloved Portland. Working with people around the world to bring awareness about our people and our legacy in any way, shape, or form is vital to me. That is why I'm here today, to stand before you and request that you guys consider and help working with us. We truly urge the council to support this important resolution. Again, thank you, Kumultata Payakwe, from all of us here, the Marshallese people in Oregon and the West Coast.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Yukio Kawano. You almost got it right. And I served on advisory board of Oregon Physician for Social Responsibility, or Oregon PSR. My concern for nuclear war is also very personal, as I am a descendant of a Hibakusha atomic bomb survivor from Hiroshima. I've lost my mother, my grandparents, and my uncle by cancer. In my work as an artist and as an educator, I negotiate my DNA by using my hair in my visual practice. I have been investigating American narratives of nuclear war and finding how Hiroshima and Nagasaki are erased in American story. Richland High School, one of the Tri-Cities of the Manhattan Project in Hanford, Washington, uses mushroom cloud for its logo. A Japanese exchange student, Ms. Koga Nonoka, studying in Richland last summer, saw this and wondered if we know that the cloud rising from the ground is made up of what the bomb destroyed, the city and the people. Yet the students from Richland are not shy about showing their pride in presenting the mascot, the bombers. It is a reminder for us all that the erasure of this history by the dominant culture in the US schools normalize violence and prepares children to accept the unacceptable. The $188 million a year that Oregonians pay in tax for these weapons deprives us all of funds that we need for education, which instead of offering students a one-sided perspective, should give them a chance to think critically in the global term. Nonoka is saying, quote, "I'm not trying to change the school logo, but want to help you consider a perspective that is more personal," end quote. This resolution today support the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, a UN treaty passed with the overwhelming support of 122 nations. Please vote yes to do your part in building the movement to prevent another Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Marshall Island from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Colleagues, that is the end of invited testimony. If we could have 2 minutes for I think we have four people signed up, is that correct?
6 right now.
If I could just ask those who are testifying, I wouldn't have brought this to council if I wasn't expecting support for it. So if you can keep your comments as brief as possible, we've got another one after this as well. Thank you.
Okay, the first 3, please come on up, are Dan Handelman, Ned Roche, and Amir Fasada.
Good afternoon. Dan, do you want to go ahead and start?
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler. Just to be clear, the 2 resolutions are listed together on the sign-up sheet. So my testimony mostly focuses on the Iran resolution. Hope that's all right. We are supportive of your support for stopping nuclear weapons. I'm Dan Handelman with Peace and Justice Works, a Rock Affinity Group. It's a sister group to Portland Copwatch, who you normally hear me talking from. Our group was also founded in 1992. And we have sent in petitions about the Iran resolution. I hope you all received them. There were some that came in around after the July 28th protest action that happened here downtown, and then we sent some more in this past week. Over 150 people signed those petitions asking you to pass resolutions against war in Iran and war in Venezuela, and we're working with community allies on the Venezuela resolution and hope that will come forward soon. We are concerned that the U.S. is sending planes and ships and drones and blaming Iran for anything that goes wrong in the region, while it supports Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen and stands aside for Turkey to invade North Syria, for instance. We are particularly glad that this resolution talks about diplomacy, but also is explicitly against the sanctions that are hurting the Iranian people. The Iraq Affinity Group watched hundreds of thousands of Iraqis die from sanctions over the years, and heard Madeleine Albright famously say in the mid-1990s that it was worth the price. I don't know how many people in this room remember that quote, but it was horrifying. So there are people in Iran dying because of the sanctions now, and it's very good that this resolution says we don't want war and we are against the sanctions. So we're very supportive of that as well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Amir Fatizadeh. I've lived here in the United States for 43 years. And I was not involved in the war between Iran and Iraq, but my whole entire family were. I have lost my father, my brother, and 95% of people that I grew up with because of the war. I traveled to Iran earlier this year and lived there for 3 months, because I wanted to witness and experience what people are actually going through. The main question that everyone asked me was, why we are holding our bargain and we are sticking to the deal that we made. Why isn't the United States doing that? We do not want another war, but the people are impacted by sanction heavily. My family is impacted by sanction. So my testimony today is on behalf of Iranian people who have suffered for a long time. They do not want another war, especially a nuclear war. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony, both of you.
Looks like we have Peter Seda, Dan Simmons, and Maggie. She's on her way down.
Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to start, please?
Thank you for sponsoring this. I'm honored to be here. It's living in the city that things are coming up for vote. I wanted to say very clearly that it's literally crazy for me to even say that we have to resort away from even thinking about nuclear weapons as any kind of a solution. And I am Persian. I was born in Iran. I've been here in Oregon since 1976. And it's literally crazy to consider war as a way to solve problems that are taking place right now. I really hope that people come to their senses as far as trying to use war and depriving one another of joy of life. And I want to thank you again for posting this event.
Thank you for being here to testify. Good afternoon.
Yes, thank you. I'm Dan Simmons. I have been in and out of the Middle East working for over 30 years. I served as a consultant to the executive director of the Middle East Council of Churches. I founded, before it was such a problem coming to light, the Middle East desk for Mercy Corps in its early days. And my last task was National Director for World Vision in Palestine and Israel. And I'm saying all of this to say that when the first war of the attacking Iraq, our then President George Bush Sr. stated something publicly He said, "There's a new world order, and what we say goes." It hasn't gone well at all. We have done what I felt would happen. As a matter of fact, after I'd spoken out here in Portland area, I went headed to Iraq to be a witness and to pray with the people there. And then I met with, I was also there for both wars. I was in the second one, I was in Palestine and Israel. And what impressed me so much is that we have disrupted the Middle East. We claimed that Iraq had yellow cake, etc., and that they were supportive of the bombing of the Trade Center. And then I met with all kinds of people in the street and people I worked with. And what impressed me is that most people there, and that includes Lebanon and its conflict, and Syria and its, is that most people are just like you and me. They have jobs to do, they want to raise their children, they want to instill their values, and they have very little power to influence the top echelons that choose whether we go to war or not. And so when I think about the suffering of literally hundreds of thousands of people, and that we have disrupted any sense of stability from Iraq to now Syria, and Lebanon has been involved, and Palestine occupation, that how can we sponsor or support another war?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Hi. Diplomacy is the way to go, obviously. But as a child, I grew up around 3 major military installations. And I had a chance to hear stories on both sides. Veterans Day was just a couple days ago, and my first volunteer job was going to visit vets in the hospital twice a week for a semester. Then I had the opportunity to hear many stories from war brides who often encountered our enemies as well, and so I got both sides of the story. But as far as like atomic devastation, there isn't anything more singularly devastating than nuclear war. And you don't even have to hate the people that you're bombing. You don't even know the people that you're bombing. And so it's just a blind indifference. It's just obliterating people off of the face of the earth for a pittance, doesn't even cost very much. And that kind of disregard for the life of our planet, of our universe, of everything, is so telling about who we are, because what we do to others, we do to ourselves. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. It seems like we've done that was testimony, was somebody else signed up?
Unless Ned Rosh was here. Oh, he is here, sorry. He was on the list. And then that's the last person I have.
Thank you. And that was for both items,
We
obviously.
had one sign-up sheet for both items.
Right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you a piece of my heart. A year ago, as many in this room know, a group of Portland area activists brought to the Rose City a 16-year-old Iraqi boy for surgery, just as we had done 10 years earlier. In both cases, surgeons in Oregon heroically saved the life of dying Mustafa. This beautiful child at the age of 2 had had a third of his body blown apart by shrapnel from a U.S. bomb dropped on Fallujah, Iraq. Our first goal was to get Mustafa the care he desperately needed that was unavailable in Iraq due to the American war on that country. Our second goal was to put a human face on the horrific butchery we call war. It was a life-changing experience to get to know and fall in love with 6-year-old Mustafa, and then again with 16-year-old Mustafa. And with that came a conviction at the deepest level that never again would we believe anyone selling war is necessary, or just, or in our best interests, or an option we just need to keep on the table. Sweet little 6-year-old Mustafa, writhing in pain from the severest of injuries, pleaded with his father to just let him die, as the suffering was beyond what he could endure. That horror, multiplied by millions, that is what war really is, and that is extremely likely what an attack on Iran would mean to Iranians, Americans, and others caught in the crossfire. It is long past time that we realize that in the next war, we and our loved ones could be Mustafa. Actually, to prevent the next war, we and our loved ones must see ourselves as Mustafa. For to stop this deranged administration, which has already taken us frighteningly close to the precipice of war with Iran, we need to understand that on each end of the rifle, we hurt, we cry, we feel, we love our families, we yearn for justice and peace. We are in fact the same. For the sake of our children and grandchildren, I ask you, please do everything in your power to prevent war against Iran. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that obviously is combined testimony. We'll vote on the first resolution, and then we'll have the presentation on the second, and then vote on that.
All right, good. So you'd like us to take the vote on the first?
Yes, please.
Okay, very good. So item number 1050, is there any further business? Please call the roll.
Udaley?
I want to thank Commissioner Fritz for bringing these items forward. I want to especially thank the women who came to share their personal experiences today. I think that their words are going to echo in my mind forever. The ash-covered river, the silence of the seashore, and the fact that that iconic mushroom cloud is actually composed of what and who was destroyed by the bomb. Nuclear war was the climate catastrophe of my generation. It is extremely disheartening that decades later, we are still in the business of nuclear weapons. I hope that we can do better for the sake of our children and our planet. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, everybody who came. This is so significant that we're doing this, and thank you for the beauty of the words about talking about some of the most horrific things. But by voicing them, by talking about them, we can hopefully do something to make sure that they don't happen again. I particularly appreciated the first speaker from Hiroshima. My mother was bombed twice in London and in Liverpool during the war. If those had been nuclear weapons, the whole of London would have gone. And I certainly would not be here. But war is horrible, whether it's in Iraq or via nuclear weapons. And so I just very much appreciate Yesenia Correa in my office, also Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, for reminding us all of our social responsibility. And thank you for those who were here in support and who chose not to testify. I greatly appreciate that too. Aye.
Wheeler?
I'd like to thank Commissioner Fritz for bringing this forward. It gave us an opportunity to hear what I thought was really extraordinary testimony. I want to thank everybody who stepped forward to give testimony, and I want to acknowledge everyone else who did not necessarily give testimony but are here to give weight to the testimony and support what we're doing. I'm happy to support this resolution. Commissioner Fritz, I vote aye. The resolution is adopted.
Do we need to read 1051, or did we already do that? I got confused.
Yes, we probably should. Sorry. Urge our federal government to engage in diplomacy with Iran.
So we're doing this a little backwards. We've heard the testimony, but now we'll hear the presentation
That's
to go
right.
with it. Commissioner Fritz.
This last summer, thank you, Mayor, the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility and the American Iranian Friendship Council communicated to City Council a request for the Council's support and passage of a resolution to urge the federal government to engage in diplomacy with Iran. This resolution is both a response to our constituents and reaffirmation of our commitment to this human issue and the Iranian and American Iranian people in Portland and abroad. Please welcome up our invited panel. We'll be giving us the background on this resolution. And again, we are running very late, so I'm going to ask everybody to please stick to the time limits. And this time, Carla, we will let the buzzer go, even though I appreciated you doing that. So our first, for introduction, Dr. Gusar Etzradi. I know how to say this too, and I just can't get to that. Could you please come up and introduce yourself and just give an introduction and overview of the resolution? Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners.
This
My
is
name
5 minutes, please.
Gudar Zektadari, and it's a beautiful situation to be with you today. I do remember Commissioner Fritz from when I was volunteering in a land use advisory and seeing her at Timbers game and Torrance game, and so it's good that we're crossing paths all the time. I only have a short and brief introduction to the Iranian community in Portland. We are around 12,000 strong community in Metropolitan, and very active in the community as well. I personally have been involved with Neighborhood Association. I was on the board of Laurelhurst Neighborhood Association, the Southeast Uplift Board for many years. And now I work as a professional for Oregon Department of Transportation. We have all kind of, I guess, contributors to the community, including City of Portland, two recent department directors, Zari Santner and Mort Noshirwani, have served the City of Portland. We do have civic activists, including one of our guests, Sahar Moranovich, who is on the school board of David Douglas, and she will be speaking and introduce herself more. Mr. David Amami, another one of Iranian American, he is on the City Council on Happy Valley. We have a Lieutenant Governor in the state of Washington, Cyrus Habib, and many other professionals at universities, at hospitals, serving the community and serving the City of Portland. The story of American Iranian Friendship Council is actually connected to one of your former colleagues, late Gretchen Kafuri. She was a Peace Corps volunteer in Iran, and I think you probably know her daughter as well. And they have been involved, and she actually told me herself a few years back that basically serving in Iran made her a better person to consider serving the country as well. We started this organization in 2007, and we were lucky that Commissioner Ekstein sponsored similar resolution back then, and Again, the story that is in that resolution back in 2007 goes to Terry O'Donnell. Terry O'Donnell, the historian, the storytellers of Portland. He lived in Iran for 17 years, and he wrote many books. He spoke Persian literally in a high level that you couldn't recognize if he's not Iranian. And so we thought at that time, actually, it was a suggestion of Gretchen to start a group of Iranian Americans. And surprisingly, there are very many Americans who had connection to Iran or who has lived in Iran for many years, especially before the Islamic Revolution. And so they have kept that friendship, and we thought it would be telling to have this resolution start from City of Portland. And last time we were the first major city in the US to pass a resolution to that effect. And I thank Commissioner Fritz for accepting to sponsoring this today. Our guests will be speaking of their own stories.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our first group, and there'll be 10 minutes altogether for this group, Sahar Jahani Muranovic is first-generation Iranian-American who serves on the David Douglas School Board and is the executive director of the Oregon chapter of the National Organization for Women. Please come on up as I'm introducing you. Dr. Kambiz Ganbasir is a professor of religion and humanities at Reed College, and Dr. Catherine Thomason is the former Physicians for Social Responsibility Executive Director who has traveled to Iran on a medical delegation. Welcome. You have 10 minutes altogether, so
thank you.
sort it between
Do I
you.
need to introduce myself again?
Please, yes, for the record.
My name is Sahar Yarjani Muranovic. Thank you for having me here today. As was mentioned, I'm on the David Douglas School Board. I actually became a U.S. citizen in February and filed to run for office several days after. And I've been serving on the board since. I'm also a member of the Multnomah County Community Involvement Committee as well. 30 years ago, I was born at Tehran Clinic in the capital of Iran. While having traveled and lived in several countries due to my father's job, I have spent several years of my life living there and would visit every summer while I was living in Austria. As far back as I can remember, almost every single Iranian has a family member or some other type of connection to the United States. My own father was pursuing his PhD in the United States when the Iranian Revolution began, and he decided to return home to witness it. Millions of Iranians pursue higher education in the United States, including myself. I moved to the US in 2011 to attend grad school. I have a master's in international human rights and a master's certificate in homeland security. Outside of pursuing higher education, the US saw a wave of incoming Iranians following the Iranian Revolution of 1979, the Iran-Iraq War thereafter, and as crackdowns on moderates and leftists surged in the following years in the country. Relations between the two governments for the last few decades has been hostile. From the axis of evil to the Muslim ban, from Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to Donald Trump, both countries have been at each other's throats for decades. This has impacted millions of families and severed many ties. My own older sister, Sarah, was detained at LAX January of 2017 following the travel ban. At the time, she was studying integrative health in Southern California and had been visiting our parents during her winter break. Due to her country of origin, she was detained for 23 hours and then forced to leave. During her detainment, she helped interpret for an older Iranian gentleman that kept repeating in Farsi that he was going to have a heart attack from the stress. Having the privilege of having a vocal sister here in the US and another one in Canada, we were able to bring her back. Not everyone is that lucky. Our current policies are not spreading democracy or fighting fascist dictators. They are not about liberating people or standing up for human rights. This is about further destabilizing a resource-rich region for money and power. This has impacted millions of families in Iran and the United States. Not everyone is privileged enough to be able to share their story. I urge our city council to support diplomacy over another grueling war. We have to put human lives and our collective betterment over profit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kambiz Ganebasiri. I was born in Tehran My family immigrated from Tehran to the United States during the Iran-Iraq War when I was about 10 years old. I came to Portland in November of 2002 to teach in the religion department at Reed College. I'm currently a professor of religion and humanities at Reed College, and I teach courses on Islamic studies and American religious history. My scholarship focuses on early and modern Islamic intellectual history and Middle East, in the Middle East, and on the history of Muslims in America. Locally, I've been working for the past couple of years with archivists at the Oregon Historical Society, Portland State University, and Reed College, as well as with mosques in the greater Portland region to preserve the rich but little-known history of Muslims in Oregon. Although I'm a U.S. citizen of Iranian background, and I'm personally affected by the negative U.S.-Iranian relationships. I have a brother who hasn't been able to live with his wife in the United States because of the Muslim ban, and a cousin who just transferred from her PhD program in the United States to United Kingdom because she wasn't able to, as a permanent resident, bring her husband over to be with her while she finishes her studies. So I'm not speaking here necessarily on and even though I'm affected by these things, I'm not here to represent Iranian American interest. Rather, I speak before you as a teacher and a scholar whose life has been dedicated to improving religious literacy and cross-cultural understanding. In the past couple of years, my professional life's efforts at improving religious literacy and cross-cultural understandings have come to feel like a wager in the power of education and dialogue. If increasing dialogue between cultures and societies is indeed a wager, I hope the fact that you're listening to this resolution means that you agree with me that we have no other choice. But to win this wager. One of the ironies of our contemporary moment in history is that even though our lives have become more intertwined through global commerce, technological advancements in transportation and digital media, we're increasingly having difficulty acknowledging one another's humanity. We're retreating into our individual worlds and becoming more divided politically and estranged to one another. This is why resolutions before you in support of dialogue and diplomacy and the work educators like me do to advance cross-cultural understanding in order to prepare us for dialogue and diplomacy across cultural, national, religious, and political divides are more important today than they have ever been. They remind us that whatever our differences may be, we share in a single world. Our actions within it have dire consequences for not only individuals, but entire communities and our natural environment. The actions you're being urged to take also allow us to imagine a world beyond the legacy of war and hate. Even though these actions may seem symbolic, they allow us to imagine. They not only allow us to imagine such a possibility, but they urge us to work toward achieving a liberatory future whose peace is inclusive of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Catherine Thomason. I'm a former director of the National Physicians for Social Responsibility. I embarked on a trip to Iran in 2009 as the president of PSR because I was petrified that we were going to go to war. I felt it was very important to establish citizen-to-citizen diplomacy so that we could work to avoid that. My citizen contingent reached out while we were there to victims of war in Iran, the chronically ill victims of chemical warfare. And our visits were written up in the Tehran News. Back in the United States, we were able to speak out for the principles of the sovereignty of Iran and against war, drawing parallels for those who've been lost in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere of our own soldiers. I was able to speak out across the country, humanizing the people of Iran to counter arcane ideas that I heard from our U.S. congressional legislators who stated that, well, Iranians cannot negotiate, can they? And yet, of course, we know that the Iranian government helped to solve one of the original hostilities in Afghanistan to the satisfaction of the United States. In my capacity as director of PSR, I worked with our staff to convince moderate U.S. congressmen that the Iran nuclear deal was indeed a wise move to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons to ensure the treaty's ratification. It was successful while it was in force to stop enrichment of uranium to weapons grade level. And it was a travesty that the current administration walked away from this treaty. I'm also here now working in Portland on behalf of Multnomah County Democrats to support this resolution as well. It's essential that city, county, and state officials go on record opposing the severe sanctions that are imposed on the Iranian people when indeed they kept their part of the bargain. The sanctions actually undermine negotiations with the hardliners in Iran, who can then point to the demon U.S. government and perpetuate animosity. I am fully in support of the sister city relationship as well with the people of Shiraz, having visited that city. Increasing awareness of our shared human experience is essential to opening diplomatic channels. I will always cherish my competitive table tennis playing in the vice president's office in Iran, and getting to know some of the 63% of physicians in Iran who are women. Thank you for my testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All three of you, thank you.
Colleagues, I just have two more invited guests. Jason Ali Allen is an Iranian American and a Portland community member, and Marion Ward is a member of the Portland Shiraz Sister City Project. Could you please come forward? This was most interesting, well, not the most interesting, but the most delightful part of this resolution was to find out that we are exploring a sister city relationship with the city of Shiraz in Iran, and in particular, that Shiraz's nickname is the city of roses and nightingales. I think that's fantastic. So please, welcome, please. We have 6 minutes for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Udaley, Commissioner Fritz, and Mayor.
Thank you.
I was born in pre-revolution Iran to an Iranian mother and an American father serving in the U.S. Army. I have over 100 family members living in Iran, and I last visited in 2003. I want to start out by remembering my first day at Martin Luther King Laboratory School in Chicagoland, where I was told by my mother not to tell anyone that I was Iranian American. The 10-year proxy war against Iran raged thereafter, and I was only able to see my grandmother one time before she died. I was lucky enough to visit Iran in 2003 and directly experience my family, Iran's beautiful people, the culture and environmental treasures there, and I have lived with a lump in my throat as a U.S. or Saudi or Israeli war on Iran seems ever more probable every year. In 2017, the arbitrary and cruel executive order known as the Muslim ban came into effect, prohibiting my relatives and all Iranians from visiting the U.S. I am here today to state that sanctions do not work. Economic strictures are acts of war which act as a blunt force tool better able to destroy a country than influence it. Sanctions are never able to specifically target those to whom the U.S. wishes to apply pressure, and the governments we sanction are able to shift the entire additional cost of sanctions onto the general population. There is no evidence to support the notion that the material suffering sanctions impose upon the Iranian populace inspires them to pressure their own government. Quite the contrary, outside pressure against Iran's economy strengthens the hand of the most hardline elements within the Iranian regime by providing a scapegoat they can point to and deflect blame away from their own performance. The most recent uprising of Iran's middle-class poor, 20-somethings, just happened in 2018 and was spurred by rural people's frustrations that the nuclear deal's economic benefits had not reached average Iranians. The protesters, and 90% of those arrested were under 25 years old, protested income inequality where the theocracy's 1% soaked up 80% of the Iran deal's economic liquidity, and they protested the money Iran spends on regional interventionism, leaving Iranians lacking government help. Back in 2009, the Green Movement was led by Iran's urban middle class who rallied with excitement around a presidential candidate representing greater social freedoms, and then surged into the street to protest the election rigging that blocked him from winning. Green Movement activists were also against the militaristic policies of the U.S. and its Middle Eastern allies in the region. Rural Iranians did not participate in the protests of urban ones and vice versa. Imagine if the demographics of the 2018 and 2009 protests found common ground and came out in unison. Urban and rural people in Iran, and urban and rural people both feeling sometimes hopeful, sometimes hopeless, frustrated with the inability of their national government, too broken by corruption to attend to the people's most pressing needs, watching the administration hope for a foreign enemy or villainous other to distract from its own failings, hoping that the people don't find a way to overcome their manufactured cultural divides, unify, and step into their power as a people. Perhaps Iran is not really that different from the US after all. Here are a few demographic facts about Iran that might encourage you about the inevitability of positive change there if we give it a chance.
I just want to give you a time check. There's only 2 minutes left for your partner to speak.
It's a total of?
Yes.
Of 6? Oh my gosh. Okay. Yes, sorry. 70% of Iran's 80 million population is under 30 years old. 97% are literate, and 60% of all university students are female. I want to encourage the council to support people-to-people diplomacy and support the resolution. Thank you. Sorry. I thought we had each.
My name is Marion Ward. Thank you very much for promulgating these resolutions. I think mine will be about 2 minutes. Prior to 2005, I knew very little about Iran, other than what I read in the newspapers or heard on television. At that time, President George Bush was threatening war with Iran. In December of 2005, I had an opportunity to be a part of a delegation to Iran with the Fellowship of Reconciliation. This is a 100-year-old international peace organization. To be totally honest, I was afraid to go because I believe much of the propaganda being disseminated by the media and by the government. I even took a stash of food with me and fully expected to be spit upon by the people. But curiosity overcame my fears and I went. That experience completely changed me and totally broadened my way of thinking. People on the street were extremely friendly and eager to meet us. The food was wonderful, and I soon disposed of the food I had brought with me. We met Jews, Zoroastrians, Orthodox Christians, and of course Muslims. In Qom, we met Mennonites and Presbyterians who were studying Islam in that holy Islamic city. We visited Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz, and were exposed to the rich Persian history and diversity within the country. Following my return, I became involved with the American-Iranian Friendship Council in Portland, which advocates for diplomacy with Iran and peaceful solutions to political differences. And Gudars has already talked about Gretchen Kafari, who's a former member of the council. I've been involved with the efforts to forge a sister city relationship between Portland and Shiraz, Iran, and both cities are known as the cities of roses, as the commissioner pointed out. In addition to governmental diplomacy, I believe that citizen diplomacy is also imperative to foster greater understanding between cultures and nations. Working for people-to-people connections with citizens in Iran is now almost impossible due to the U.S. travel ban. And I'll leave the rest of this
Thank you, that's lovely.
with you to read, but I urge you to cast a vote for peace and adopt this resolution.
Thank you, and thank you for working with the Office of Government Relations on that sister city relationship. That's exciting. Thank you. That concludes our presentation. We can call the roll, please.
Udaley?
Well, thank you again to Commissioner Fritz for bringing this resolution forward. Thank you to everyone who gave invited testimony. I'll make sure they get it. Thank you. The Trump administration's ignorant and bigoted policies, whether it's withdrawing from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or the Muslim ban, are an embarrassment to this country and to me personally. So I'm very pleased to support this resolution. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Well, again, thank you to my two colleagues for making up the quorum here and for paying such good attention to the very moving testimony that we heard. Thank you to Yesenia Carrillo and my office, the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsible, and Responsibility and the American-Iranian Friendship Council. Although we don't have any jurisdiction over federal decisions, we can use our voices and we can ask our congressional delegation to speak for us in Washington. And by passing this resolution, that's what we will be directing them to do. Thank you again to those who came. Thank you to our wonderful Iranian community here in Portland. It's part of the richness that makes up the fabric of our society, and I really appreciate you all being here. Aye.
Wheeler.
Again, Commissioner Fritz, thank you for bringing this forward. It's very important, and I appreciate the testimony. It's been really fascinating to hear people's testimony, and I feel like I've learned a lot today as a result. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, everyone who testified. Thank you, Commissioner.
Before we move to the thank you very much. Before we move to the last item, Mayor, I need a compassion break.
Okay, why don't we take a 2-minute break? And colleagues, I have a hard out at 5:55 because I'm giving a speech at 6.
Oh, wow.
And I think if I get on my bike, I can get there in exactly 5 minutes.
Okay.
So let's really keep it to 2 minutes.
So if anybody I'm going to go to the bathroom, but then if you want to take a picture, you can be in the picture, which will take approximately 5 seconds. So if either of
I was telling people we're here.
Can't make it stand up though. It's practical maths. If you're giving a speech, I would get a free speech.
All right, we are back in session. Carla, could you please read item 1052?
Amend trees in development situations code to extend sunset date for certain tree preservation regulations in development situations on private property.
Colleagues, Title 11, the tree code, is one tool used to meet the goals set forth in the Urban Forest Management Plan, including increased tree canopy, enhanced urban forest through development and redevelopment, and consistent and clear regulation. 3.5 years ago, City Council adopted amendments to the Tree Code, Title 11, to strengthen regulations for preservation of private trees in development situations. The amendments were intended to be a fast-track measure to incentivize the preservation of large-diameter trees in development situations until such time as a more comprehensive review of Title 11 could take place. To that end, the amendments were adopted with a sunset date of December 31st, 2019. Though there is some data to indicate that the amendments have increased the rate of preservation of large diameter trees to date, a comprehensive review of the amendments adopted in 2016 has not taken place. The Bureau of Development Services, with the support of the City Forester, recently proposed extending the sunset date of those amendments an additional 2 years until December 31st, 2021. As required by Title 11, the proposal was heard by both the Planning and Sustainability Commission and the Urban Forestry Commission. The PSC and UFC, as they're known respectively, made recommendations on the extension of the sunset date of the amendments passed in 2016. They also made recommendations relating to an exemption from tree preservation regulations for certain zones, CX, EX, IG1, IH, and changed a threshold for certain tree preservation regulations from 36 inches to 20 inches. Those components of the Commission's recommendations will be brought to Council on December 5th due to constraints with the Council agenda and because action on this specific component is required in order to be effective by the end of the calendar year. Emily Sandy with BDS is here to present a summary of the proposal and both the Commission's recommendation on the extension of the sunset date of the 2016 amendments. So with that, Emily Sandy, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. Good evening. I know this has been a really long day and
but interesting.
Probably kind of emotional. So I think I cut this down to 3 minutes. As the mayor said, this is a proposal to extend the sunset date for certain tree preservation regulations from December 31st, 2019 to December 31st, 2021. I just want to be clear, we're talking about tree preservation regulations for private trees in development situations. I'm going to try not to repeat a lot of the mayor's points, but essentially for Title 11 development-related code amendments, it goes to 2 commissions, the Urban Forestry Commission, the Planning and Sustainability Commission. We're here tonight for City Council, hopefully decision. But in the, going back in time a little bit to 2015, when the tree code was adopted or effective January 1st, 2015. Shortly after that, there was a removal of several especially large diameter trees that caused a lot of concern among the community. Commissioner Fritz at the time was the Parks Commissioner, and she initiated us doing a fast track or stopgap amendment to sort of immediately address a pressing need to increase tree preservation for especially large-sized trees. There was some outreach that was done to some committees at the time. There wasn't the level of outreach and analysis that we would expect of ourselves, and that was acknowledged at the time. Those amendments were effective May 2016. I won't get into the details of what changed in 2016, but essentially what happened is we moved from treating all trees the same regardless of their size to placing a special emphasis on trees that had a 36-inch diameter or greater. There was a requirement for required tree preservation or a fee in lieu of preservation for those large-sized trees. And there was also a change in how the fee in lieu of preservation was calculated. And at 36 inches, it moved to a much higher fee in lieu of preservation, relatively speaking, to the smaller-sized trees. Again, sort of acknowledging the fast nature of these amendments, a sunset date was put on it of December 31st, 2019. Since that time, there is some data that it has been effective at increasing the rate of preservation for those larger sized trees and increasing the revenue generated by the fee in lieu of preservation that goes to the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. There's a lot we still don't know related to equity considerations from a variety of lenses. We haven't done analysis on if these are actually the right tools and if they're valuing the right kinds of trees. We also don't know how they're integrated into other city priorities and other city projects that are happening. So the Planning and Sustainability Commission had their hearing. They recommended to extend the sunset date as proposed an additional 2 years. The Urban Forestry Commission had a slightly different take, which was to extend the sunset date for 2 years or for the duration of any declared climate emergency. The request for your action today is, there's actually in your packet, there's Exhibit A and Exhibit B. Exhibit A is to adopt a recommendation to extend the sunset date to December 31st, 2021. Exhibit B is to adopt the recommendation to extend the sunset date to December 31st, 2021, or for the duration of a declared climate emergency. Just throwing that out there as another alternate, you could just move to just remove the sunset date altogether. I think BDS's position is that we would prefer to keep a sunset date in there. Removing the sunset date doesn't preclude any future work from happening, but it does sort of, it's an acknowledgement that we really do need to do more work on this.
Very good. Commissioner Fritz?
Sure. I would fully support removing the sunset clause. I don't understand why it's there at all. And I think certainly we need to do more work, but the message it sends to the community, or I think the impression is that we think possibly in 2 years we might not need these protections. Like, I understand the intent, but I don't think that in my lifetime we're not going to need these protections.
I'm so glad
So I move to remove the sunset.
Could I just ask a question
Sure.
first and then? The only reason I was not going to make the same speech was wondering if we keep the sunset on, does that force the bureaus to do more work? If we don't have any kind of deadline, are we sure that the ongoing work on the bigger issues of Title 11 will get done?
Well, as you can see, we had a sunset date for 3 years that didn't result in, a comprehensive project. I could tell you that.
Stop right there. Would you make your motion again?
Well, I have a couple other comments. First
Well,
of
I
all,
want to second the motion, though.
trees and development situations, my new band name. Can we just acknowledge how funny that sounds? Okay.
Should add private trees in there.
Pardon? Oh, yeah.
Tree preservation of private trees
and
and
development
development
situations. Well, that just sounds really sketchy. Yes. So I have a few other comments, but I think I'll wait till the rest of the invited testimony. But I'd like to move to remove the sunset clause.
Second.
We have a motion on the table, and we have a second, and we'd certainly enjoy public testimony on that item. So we have invited testimony. We have the Planning and Sustainability Commission. Chris Smith is here for a second item today. We appreciate your forbearance. And then my understanding is we have representatives from both the Urban Forestry Commission as well as the Portland Youth Climate Council. I would implore you to please stay under 3 minutes so that we can keep the quorum.
Okay. Chris Smith, Vice Chair of the Planning and Sustainability Commission, carrying the Commission's recommendation, and I'll be very brief. We agreed with staff that further data and analysis, including specifically around equity, would be appropriate. We also heard public testimony in support of that. We also heard public testimony supporting stronger provisions in the tree code and made an additional recommendation based on that, which I understand you will take up in December, so I won't go into that. So in short, we recommend extending the sunset date by 2 years.
My name is Bruce Nelson. I'm a member of the Urban Forestry Commission. 36 inches is roughly this size. If you think of how many trees in Portland are that size, that's what we're dealing with. Primarily Doug firs, but there are others. A little bit of background information. I'm going to rush this. Of the heritage trees in Portland, approximately 2/3 of the species attain this size. Of the trees in Portland's developed parks that have been inventoried, approximately 25% can reach that size. Of the street trees in Portland that have been inventoried in 59 neighborhoods, probably 3% attain that size, just so you have an idea how many trees we're dealing with. And there are a lot of species of trees that you may love dearly, and they will never get to 36 inches. And if there is a development project on that site, they will see no special privileges. The Portland Climate Action Plan calls for every neighborhood to have a goal of 25% canopy. Currently, 80% of the neighborhoods in Portland do not reach that canopy. You remove big trees today, we do not get that canopy back for 30 years, if ever. So again, keeping in mind that particular approach. So I would close very briefly. 36 inches is a start. 36 inches DBH is a large tree. 36 inches, you see it takes many years to grow so tall and wide, to quietly clean our air, our Portland outside, to absorb rainwater, to slow its eventual flow, to calm Portlanders from the go, go, go. 36 inches DBH in size. If we are wise, we'll try to keep you in place for the climate change we now face. Calls for help here, now, and forever for all of us. Together, together, together. 36 inches is a start.
That's cool. Okay,
Thank
everybody
you
else has to do
very
your
much. Yeah,
testimony in rhyme
I
as
wouldn't
well.
want to have to go next. Excellent. And did we have somebody here from
you.
the Portland Youth Climate Council? Did we have a representative? Very good. Come on down.
Yes, definitely.
Welcome. Name for the record, please. Thank you.
How's it going, y'all?
Good.
My name is Simon Skates.
My name is Tessa Norris.
We'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter, specifically the sunset clause, which has been brought up. The Portland Youth Climate Council believes that the best action forward would be to permanently remove the sunset clause. Instead, we want to forever preserve our large trees or require fees in lieu of preservation on an inch-by-inch mitigation fee for trees 36 inches in diameter or larger. This past year, the Portland Youth Climate Council members representing 10 public schools worked hard to bring the issue before you. For many of us, 6% of our short lives have been dedicated to working on the tree code. It's no joke. As you know, trees are necessary to the health and well-being of all our communities. Trees, and large trees in particular, provide habitat for countless animals, cool neighborhoods during hot days, lowering cooling costs, and reduce the risk of heat stroke for the elderly during the ever-increasingly hot summers. On that same note, they sequester CO2, providing a healthier community for everyone as Portland air quality declines. Due to the drought in Oregon, Many of our larger conifers, such as western red cedars, are dying in the city. And therefore, it's more important than ever to preserve our remaining larger trees. As one city arborist put it, all urban trees are stressed, and so are we.
In 7 years, I will be 22 years old. I will be graduating college, trying to find a job in my field, and getting ready to start my life as an adult. What I didn't plan on was dealing with the high levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, one of the causes of our present-day climate crisis. I feel a sense of urgency to solve this problem. Growing up in Portland, I felt the cool air the trees provided us. Now, I realize that trees are our first defense against the climate crisis. Not only do trees trap and hold pollutants that can damage lungs, but large trees can also cool the ambient air temperature through transpiration, reducing urban heat islands in our ever-sweltering summers. I want to live the rest of my life here. I want to have a family, a dog, a cozy house, and one of the things standing in my way is something that can be fixed by all of you. I want the lives of my children and families not to be severely impacted by climate change. I want the future of the city I love to be a healthy place. While many adults may say I plan ahead too much, I worry about the future too much, and that I'm too young to be dealing with such issues, I agree. But what else can I do? There is a lot to worry about. I have so much to learn, and I still have so much to do, and I won't get the same opportunities you had to live in a world with a stable climate. But now you, the City Council, has invited the Portland Youth Climate Council to share our recommendations, and that is why I sit here telling you that we are in real danger. By removing the sunset clause, we can take action. Even though this is such a small step, it is going to prove to me and my generation whether or not you and your generation really care. Please take the necessary steps to protect the climate, even if they are small, by removing the sunset clause altogether to preserve and/or mitigate for our large diameter trees. Thank you for doing the right thing, not only for me, but for you and for your children and for all the city of the city of Portland.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. Appreciate your testimony. Very good. And did you want to ask staff any questions based on the testimony?
I just have a couple questions.
All right, could we have staff come up? And Lauren, I think you had some comments with regard to the sunset clause issue as well.
So the question was posed to me about whether or not it would be appropriate to remove the sunset clause in today's hearing. It was noticed that this was a hearing about extending the extension date, and so the scope of that amendment may exceed what people thought that was going to be discussed and moved tonight, and they may not have had the opportunity to participate and know, because it's entirely removing it as opposed to modifying it or tweaking it is potentially more generous than what people expected to be discussed.
Can I ask a question on that? Since this is a first reading, we're not going to be taking a vote tonight on the main motion. If we leave the amendment open, in other words, don't vote on the amendment tonight, would that then qualify as adequate notice?
Yes, potentially BDS can provide notice through their avenues to make sure people are aware and opportunity for people to testify.
Colleagues, would you have any objection to that?
Alternatively, we could extend it to 2050.
That's true.
Yes. But would that still present the same problem because it's a significant?
Yeah, it is not a land use decision, so we're
Change.
not it's not a land use code amendment, so we're not in the realm of land use, but it's more just providing people due process and the opportunity to participate and whether or not they think.
But would we still have to provide that same process, extending it 10 times longer than we noticed? We wouldn't?
No.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I'll amend my amendment, making it very clear that I absolutely support removing the sunset clause, but because of this challenge the city attorney has highlighted, we are going to extend it to 2050. I will be 80 years old and hopefully sitting under a tree somewhere.
I won't quite be 100, that's really... I'll be there to say, take off the sunset again. Second.
Okay, thank you.
December 31st of 2050, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
December
we
31st.
so are you removing your First Amendment?
Well, yes, I mean, I said I'm amending my amendment, but it's a new amendment. So we're
Okay,
going to
so-
extend the sunset clause to December 31st, 2050.
Okay, very good. So we have a second and a motion for the Udaly amendment, and that is now on the table.
Okay. So please bear with me. I'm a little bit confused about what we need to address today based on the materials and what we will talk about on December 5th. So I just want to lay out a couple items or questions that I have. One, I'm really concerned about this, what a blunt tool the 36-inch measure is, because we've just heard that so many trees, when they reach full maturity, will never be 36 inches. So I want to look at a more nuanced policy, or perhaps just reducing that size altogether. Two, are our mitigation requirements and in lieu fees high enough? I don't want developers to continue to just write off taking down mature trees as a business expense. I want them to feel it, and I want them to pay the true cost of what they're taking away from our community. So that's and when I'm done, just tell me we'll talk about that now, or we'll talk about it December 5th. And three, I am concerned about the exemption for affordable housing, and that is because a lot of the affordable housing is going up in these 80% of neighborhoods that don't have the urban canopy coverage that we want. So I need to understand that they just don't have to mitigate or pay in lieu at all currently.
Speaking to the affordable housing amendment, that was something that was introduced at council back in 2016. And the way it works is if you qualify for systems development charges exemptions as established by the Housing Bureau, then you qualify for this exemption. It's prorated as well. So if, in a multi-dwelling development, for example, if 2 of your 10 units qualify for the SDC exemption, you basically get a 20% discount on the fee in lieu of
The private developers who are building under our current IZ policy would get a prorated exemption.
I don't know if IZ correlates exactly to the SDC exemption. It might not. I don't know the answer to that question. But if they're
Okay.
the same, then yes.
And are affordable housing developers required to plant new trees?
Yeah, if they're in a zone that requires tree density. So they're subject to the same thing as everyone else. There's no similar exemption in tree planting.
Okay.
Do you have a? Yeah. You can plant or pay, but that's different than a exemption altogether.
So are these questions that I would have to address in this item, or can we address these on December 5th?
So what this item is a recognition that we have not yet talked about the issues that you have brought up. That, however, is not December 5th either. This is saying we have not talked about these. If we don't pass something right now, these regulations are going to expire at the end of this year. So we want to put at least a sunset on the table, and also recognize that there is more work to be done.
Okay.
I wanted to say, Jen Cairo is the city forester here with me. If you have any, she can help answer questions too.
Jen, didn't we have something in the code about different species of tree having different significances that, depending on isn't there something in there?
Not exactly, Commissioner. There are provisions regarding trees species that are regarded to be nuisance or weed trees. But other than that, there are no specifics about species in terms of tree preservation requirements and private property development.
I know the Planning Commission worked on having a whole list of if it's a madrone, it's significant at 10 inches. I can't remember the specifics, but particular kinds of trees.
Yeah, there are a list of trees that are more significant. and they have a slightly different requirement for preservation, and I honestly think that they're required to be preserved, just the same as a 36-inch tree.
I think that's under Title 33, so it's for the
Yeah, that's for environmental zones, perhaps.
Yes, the special zoning areas.
Actually, Commissioner Daly, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head in terms of we really need to do a comprehensive review of Title 11. We put our best effort into it under Mayor Adams. We then implemented it and have found over the years since it started being implemented various things that do or don't work. This is the latest glitch. So I do think at the December 5th that we need to have a conversation about how we're going to fund in the next budget a desperately needed overview. And that means all of you need to come back in the budget process, because that's really where the decisions are made, and it just keeps getting punted and it doesn't get any easier to fix things if all we do is just keep kicking the can or cutting the trees.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. That's been our interest for a while. And this one that's expiring, this particular provision, as Emily has said, clearly we don't want it to expire, so we needed to get this in front of you. As you know from all your experience with city codes, they can be intertwined, and to pull one thread means other areas are affected.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I know
so
that well.
we would really want to do that work thoroughly.
So I don't mean to be a wet blanket, but
You have to go.
I'm expected to speak in
Yeah.
15 minutes, so I want to get to public testimony.
Yeah.
We're not going to take the vote today anyway, so.
Are we going to start on the amendment? To put these on
I
the
would
table?
rather we not, particularly given Commissioner Fish is not here and urban forestry is in his portfolio, but I'd be inclined to leave it open. We can have that conversation.
Okay.
I'll just quickly say I'm looking forward to discussing removing the commercial and industrial exemptions on December 5th.
Very good. Carla, how many people do we have signed up for public testimony?
We have 6.
2 minutes each, please.
Okay, the first 3, please, coming up are Micah Mescal, Tony Holmberg, and Brad Bauer.
I think you've got a lot, very supportive council, so anything else you
Yeah,
want.
I'm gonna keep it real brief.
it on.
Mike Mescal, Portland Audubon. We urge you to extend this. We support removing the sunset clause or extending it to 50 years, but we don't want that to preclude us from improving upon this big tree amendment into the future. And then one thing of note to the December 5th, we're really excited about that opportunity because it really gives us a chance to make Title 11 more equitable, specifically in removing Title 11 exemptions for commercial and industrial lands permanently. Those overlay with our urban heat islands and are often adjacent to low-income communities and communities of color. And those spaces need to benefit from trees as well. So we support your guys'
Well
effort.
said, thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi there. My name is Tony Holmberg, and I'm a resident of Maplewood neighborhood. So I strongly urge the City Council to extend these mitigation fees. A fir that's 36 inches across might be 60 years old. Thank you very much. And I think trees like this should be seen as investments in the future. Urban trees, as we've heard, filter pollutants and fine particulates. Living in treed environments, like I'm lucky enough to do, fosters mental well-being. Most importantly, trees reduce air conditioning and heating needs, saving energy, reducing greenhouse gases. So I think that trees are one of the cheapest ways that Portland can actually achieve many of our goals. So I have no doubt also that developers will be able to continue to thrive in Portland, a city that gets 100 new people a day. My hope is that these fees will continue to provide a financial incentive to trigger design and creativity that's needed so that trees and home building and industry can thrive. And I agree with Commissioner Udaley that the fees should be high enough to really offset the loss of these public assets. And I really encourage the city to look towards Vancouver, BC. That's one city that I've read a lot about that does a lot with urban trees and has really significant laws protecting them. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Good afternoon.
My name is Brad Baher, and I'm also just a neighbor in Maplewood. I'm a former chair of Fans of Fano Creek on the west side. Thank you for taking this up. The initial reasons for enacting mitigation fees that developers currently pay to cut down large trees haven't changed. If anything, as the effects of global climate change become increasingly apparent, it's even more important to recognize the positive public benefits afforded by trees when the council adopts policy. Erosion control, surface water infiltration, soil stability, shade-afforded temperature moderation, carbon capture, oxygen production, and air quality improvement, they're all public benefits that trees, especially well-established trees, provide year-round. And this is to say nothing about the benefits to wildlife and the livability of our wonderful city. Each large tree removal comes at a cost to our communities. I support extending the mitigation fees and urge you to do so as well. Additionally, I encourage the adoption of a 20-inch or greater diameter at breast height trigger for the mitigation instead of the current 36-inch or greater DBH. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, all three of you. Appreciate it. Next three, please, Carl.
Are Edith Gillis, Greg Snyder, and Don Smallman.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your patience.
I'm going to be running. I'm supposed to ask you the first question, but I'll have to run while you're bicycling. My time hasn't started yet. I want us to make sure that we don't just go with 36 or 20, but 6-inch, because you'll never get to 36 or 20-inch unless you have those trees that were smaller, and trees are going to take longer to grow as we have worse growing conditions. I also want us to mandate that we have urban permaculture food forests throughout the city, because we have an emergency. We're going to run out of food. We can no longer afford to depend upon food from California. Not only that, we need to mandate that any new legislation, any new development has to have tree. It could be roof trees, it could be alongside the buildings, but we need to have more trees if you're going to have more roof space. We need to also mandate that all new roofs and all roofs of city tax-supported buildings have food, water, fiber, or energy development of plants on the roofs. I am very scared that industrial owners are going to have a vested interest to get rid of all the trees now. So I want to make sure we do something that in the interim they aren't having a vested interest to just log everything as they can. I also want to make sure that we are working for equity, and we need to have growth in place for elders as well as our tree elders. So please, please make sure that we're aware that all these trees we may have there now could very soon have a pandemic and die, just as we've had with alder, we're having with our red cedar, we've had with other Norfolk. So please, please make sure that you have a diversity of plants and that we plant far more trees for food and for biodiversity and for pollinators.
Thank you.
My name's Greg Snyder. I was here 3 years ago when the last tree code hearing was held. I have to say I find it extremely distressing and frustrating that nothing has been done in that time to advance a comprehensive tree code. It's appalling, and it gives me no faith that it will happen in the future. But that said, moving forward, it's remarkable to me that in our current state of climate crisis, Portland has such a weak tree code that is based more on money than environmental science. The arguments for preserving urban trees should not have to be made over and over, and the gentleman that just gave several arguments was very eloquent in his testimony. People who stand to make a profit from the cutting of trees have no place in the decision-making of tree code and environmental protection. The idea that you just pay to cut down a tree means trees that should not be cut down continue to be cut down. We can no longer allow money to be the determining factor in our tree code. Our city and our planet will not survive if we do not protect our trees. And tree codes are only as good as the ability to monitor and enforce the code. So I urge you, along with passing the extension, and I think the extension, I agree, should be, you have no sunset date, and 2050 would be okay compromise at this point.
You can come back and do that later.
But I would urge you to give serious attention to supplying the Department of Urban Forestry with the money, personnel, and tools they need to enforce the tree code and hopefully a more sensible and rigorous tree code that comes along in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Dawn Smallman. I work professionally as the director of the largest environmental film festival in the Pacific Northwest. I'm here today to ask you to extend the Big Tree Amendment to make it permanent or to make it to 2050. That's a stopgap measure, but I consider that also to be kicking the can down the road. Let's just make it permanent if we can. I too am dismayed that Title 11 has not been gone over again in the number of years, and I appreciate that BDS comes back because it's about to run out, but that's kind of an indication of how low it is on their priority list, and I think it needs to be much elevated on BDS's priority list. Title 11 is woefully inadequate for what we're facing right now and really needs to be prioritized, so I hope that you'll work towards making that a priority. It really comes down to respecting our elders. There's no other social program or policy that comes through the city where you would say it's okay to throw the seniors under the bus. We'll just mitigate for that. That's what you're doing with the current tree code policies. We need to respect our elders. Elder and mature trees provide a wealth of things. You've heard people list them off today: stormwater management, clean our air, reduce our urban temperatures, improve the health of our communities, lower crime. There's tons of science on this, on what mature tree canopies provide. It's there, the science is there. BDS might need to study it, but there's tons of scientific work that's already been done. They can look it up and study it here locally, but there's clear science that shows the advantage of mature trees. We have to move during these climate times, during climate collapse, during climate chaos. We have to move past this inadequate traditional mindset of mitigation. There's no way any kind of fine plus a small tree mitigates the benefits that are lost when you cut a mature tree. In the last 50 years, bird populations have plummeted 29% in 50 years, hugely because of habitat loss. It's time we respect our elders. It's time we get our Title 11 correct, reviewed, updated, and I hope you'll extend the Big Tree Amendment and remove the exemptions in December for commercial and industrial properties. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate your testimony, both of you. Appreciate it. Anybody else, Carla?
That's all who signed up.
All right. Any further questions quickly while we have team here? Thank you, everybody who stuck around, testified. Carla informs me we can continue this then until December 5th, time certain, 3 p.m. Commissioner Hardesty is out, but the rest of us are present for that day. Thank you all. This item is continued, and we are, after almost 9 hours, adjourned.